Yun Qi faces the conferred god stage with his profound energy spent and his body broken. The glazed light realm watches, and a fire prison holds the only key to victory. Leave a like and subscribe to walk this path. Overnight celebrity, I don't deserve victory. To think that such words would be uttered by a god-child of the eastern region in front of so many people. The people were definitely surprised, but they suddenly realized that they weren't puzzled by his reaction. On the contrary, his words sparked a strange resonance in their hearts. "Sect Master, the young master is—" A Shrouding Sky Realm elder spoke up urgently. However, the Shrouding Sky Realm king raised a hand and stopped him from continuing any further. His gaze was surprisingly approving. Honorable Kui wrinkled his eyebrows and asked again, "Lu Lengchuan, this is your last warning." "I surrender," Lu Lengchuan declared before Honorable Kui could finish his question. This time the words were spoken even more unhesitatingly than before. "Yun Qi." Honorable Kui stopped trying and declared immediately, "Lu Lengchuan surrenders the conferred god battle. Yun Qi wins and will enter the 6th losers group battle tomorrow." There was a short silence, and the spectators' stand erupted into thunderous applause and earth-shaking cheers. Lu Lengchuan was victorious, but had surrendered the battle willingly. Normally, his actions would be booed, especially considering that he was fighting on the conferred god stage. But the applause and cheers kept going on and on like a tidal wave. Countless profound practitioners were standing or even flying in the air. As it turned out, the reception of this battle far exceeded the one between Luo Changsheng and Jun Zile. Yun Qi looked up and surveyed his surroundings slowly. "I didn't realize there were so many people who wanted me to win." If someone were to recall the battle, they would realize that it was nearly a one-man show by Yun Qi. Again and again he had shaken every profound practitioner's eyeballs, heart, and soul. Again and again he had created miracles right before their eyes. Although Lu Lengchuan was one of the famous 4 god children of the eastern region, Yun Qi was the one who pulled at their heartstrings from the beginning to the end. His performance today was as bright as the golden crow flames he ignited, whereas Lu Lengchuan was really just a foil that added to his brilliance. This was Yun Qi's battle. This was a miraculous battle that belonged to the eastern divine region alone. Yun Qi deserved to win. He deserved to win far more than Lu Lengchuan ever would in this particular battle. Since the moment Yun Qi summoned his manifest god and challenged Lu Lengchuan with all 3 layers of his barriers active, nearly every spectator, including a large majority of the Shrouding Sky Realm disciples, had come to root for Yun Qi. That was why the spectators were unusually silent when the golden crow flames died, and Lu Lengchuan got back onto his feet. That was why they were all looking dissatisfied and reluctant until just now. When Honorable Kui declared Yun Qi's victory, the cheers were so loud that it was as if thunder had descended from the 9th heaven. It was clear from this huge discrepancy who was the true victor of this battle. "Yun Qi, ha 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 ha, well done, boy." The Snow Song Realm's elders and disciples could no longer rein in their excitement or tears. They were so excited that they forgot Eternal Heaven Realm's renown and charged onto the conferred god stage surrounding Yun Qi. If the young man wasn't grievously wounded, they would have tossed him into the air in celebration. "Junior brother Yun, you are the pride of Snow Song Realm," an elder disciple said tearfully and tremblingly. "Well done, Yun Qi. Divine Ice Phoenix Sect. No, the entire Snow Song Realm is proud of you. Well done." Mu Huanji was so excited that his beard was flying all over the place. When he remembered that his granddaughter had the fortune to become his dual cultivation incubator, he couldn't help but laugh from the bottom of his heart. "Yun Qi, you've actually beaten one of the 4 god children. Your name is going to spread throughout the eastern divine region." "Ha ha ha ha, let's see who else dares question the sect master's decision to take Yun Qi in as her direct disciple. Yun Qi, you may know. You'll definitely surpass the sect master in the future. You won't just be the pride of Snow Song Realm today, you'll definitely bring prosperity and honor to the Snow Song Realm in the future as well." "Back down, please." Mu Bingyun walked forwards and isolated the crowd from Yun Qi. "Yun Qi is seriously wounded, and he has used up all of his profound energy. Watch yourselves and make sure you don't accidentally hurt him." She then put a hand on Yun Qi's chest and injected a gentle wave of frost energy straight into his body. Yun Qi smiled. "It's okay, I'm fine." "All 5 of your viscera have fallen apart. There's nothing fine about that at all." Mu Bingyun frowned and scolded him slightly. Yun Qi continued to smile at her. "This really is not a problem for me." Although the battle was already over, the crowd's presence on the stage was still impudent to say the least. However, Honorable Kui didn't chase them off the stage despite wearing a frown. Instead, he stared at Yun-Chi with complicated feelings for a very long time. Every Flame God Realm member, especially those who belonged to the Golden Crow sect, was flushed red with passion. They were excited because Yun-Chi had used the Golden Crow flames to beat Lu Lengchuan. From this day onwards, Yun-Chi's name would resound throughout the world. The Golden Crow flames would become a deep memory in every profound practitioner's mind once more. They could imagine how much better they would be treated in the future when they revealed themselves to be Golden Crow sect members in the future. On the other side, the shrouding Sky Realm King stood up and walked towards Lu Lengchuan. Although Lu Lengchuan lost the battle and became the only god child who failed to become a top 6 fighter in the conferred god battle, the Realm King didn't blame him in the slightest. On the contrary, he gave his son a heavy slap on the shoulder and laughed loudly. "You've made the absolute best decision. You truly are my son, ha 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 ha." Meanwhile, earth-shaking roars were exploding from every region and corner of the Snow Song Realm and Flame God Realm. The shouts were so great that both star realms were literally shaking. Yun-Chi won! Our Yun-Chi won the conferred god battle. Top 6, top 6. To think that he's one of us and our Realm King's disciple. I'm not dreaming, am I? Since Yun-Chi beat one of the 4 god children of the Eastern region, does that mean that Yun-Chi will replace Lu Lengchuan and become the new god child? Of course he will. Wah. First he whipped the son of the Holy Eve's Realm King, then he crushed the son of the Divine Martial Realm King. Who cares if they're the top geniuses of upper star realms? They're all losers under his feet. Now he's even beaten a god child. Ooh, he's one of us. I'm so glad I was born in Snow Song Realm. Although Yun-Chi's complete victory over Luo Chang'an and Wu Gaik had also started a loud commotion, they were utterly incomparable to the noise generated by this new victory. It was true that Lu Lengchuan was the one who had surrendered willingly, but Yun-Chi still would have been the victor in the people's hearts even if he hadn't done so. Their cheers were reserved for Yun-Chi only. The 4 battles today had ended in an absolutely gorgeous manner. The 2 fights that would happen during the 6th losers group battle that would be fought tomorrow and the battle ranking list were displayed on the screen. First battle: Flying Star Realms Meng Duengxi versus Jasper Heart Sword Pavilion's Jun Zile. Second battle: Glazed Light Realms Shui Meiyan versus Snow Song Realms Yun-Chi. After the battle ended, just before the spectators left, nearly everyone at the conferred god stage, the god emperors, star gods, moon gods, guardians, realm kings, elders, and young profound practitioners had glanced at Yun-Chi at least one time. Before they knew it, Yun-Chi had become the absolute center of attention of this conferred god battle. Mu Bingyun waited until Yun-Chi's wounds had sufficiently stabilized before she led him away. "I wonder if your master would be happy or furious after seeing your match today," Mu Bingyun whispered. Even she couldn't believe that Yun-Chi had actually taken out Lu Lengchuan. He had fought Lu Lengchuan head-on, stunned every divine master out there with his manifest god, and conjured a 9 suns heaven's fury that looked like a falling sun. She would never have imagined that the man she took back to the Snow Song Realm, as repayment for saving her life, would rock the entire Eastern divine region with his feats on the conferred god stage in just 3 years. "Master probably can't bear to get angry with me even if she wanted to," Yun-Chi replied softly. Mu Bingyun. They fell silent for a very long time. The atmosphere between Mu Bingyun and Yun-Chi instantly grew awkward. A group of people happened to pass by them at this very moment. When Yun-Chi subconsciously turned his head to see who it was, he came eye to eye with Lu Lengchuan. Yun-Chi and Lu Lengchuan stopped in their tracks at nearly the same time. Mu Bingyun glanced sideways before saying, "He's the one who gave you your victory. Go thank him." Yun-Chi nodded and flew towards Lu Lengchuan. Lu Lengchuan sent his people away before flying towards Yun-Chi too. "Brother Yun, you seem to be fine." Lu Lengchuan looked very surprised when he saw Yun-Chi's condition. It wasn't obvious because he had changed into a new set of clothes, but there were still burn marks all over Lu Lengchuan's body. Even with his cultivation level, it would take him quite a bit of time before he could recover fully. "I'm fine now," Yun-Chi answered before thanking him sincerely. "Brother Lengchuan, this victory is very important to me. I thank you very much for your aid." "You don't have to thank me." Lu Lengchuan shook his head. "I've cultivated almost twice as long as you have, and you're only in the divine tribulation realm. However, your bloodline, elemental power, power of comprehension, and potential, You've surpassed me in nearly every way. I simply don't deserve to win. Yunqi, you deserve this victory. You deserve to stand on the conferred God stage far more than I do. Lu Lengchuan smiled. I'm certain that everyone, even me, is looking forward to your next match, not mine. That is why I accept this loss wholeheartedly. I would only feel uncomfortable had I claimed this victory by force, and I'm certain that no one would cheer for me. Yun Qi smiled. You're the one who gave me the victory, but here you are trying to console me. You truly are a rare character, Brother Lengchuan. Ha ha ha, rare characters like me can be found everywhere, but people like you can't be found even after 1,000,000 years, I suspect. Lu Lengchuan laughed loudly. Suddenly, he narrowed his eyes and said seriously, I'm not sure if your technique is the God manifestation art my father spoke of, but I do know that I would have lost much sooner if you had used it from the beginning. Yun Qi, you were planning to save this trump card for another time, weren't you? Your goal in this conferred God battle is farther than it appears. Are you aiming for Luo Changsheng, for example? Yun Qi didn't deny it. He slowly nodded. I thought so. Lu Lengchuan raised his eyebrows and looked like he wanted to say something. How do you compare to Jun Zile, Brother Lengchuan? Yun Qi asked. Lu Lengchuan said slowly and heavy-heartedly without any hesitation. I'm far beneath her. The word far was emphasized quite strongly. Yun Qi's chest heaved once before he let out a sigh. I guess it's impossible for me to beat Jun Zile as she is, much less Luo Changsheng. Jun Zile is Senior Sword Sovereign's only successor, and there's nothing ordinary about her. As for Luo Changsheng, everyone knows that he's a real monster. Maybe if you had a couple more years, you'd be able to fight them evenly or even surpass them. Lu Lengchuan obviously thought very highly of Yun Qi, but his tone took a sharp turn as he said, But as of now, there's no way you're a match for either one of them. Lu Lengchuan just fought Yun Qi on the conferred God stage, so no one knew about Yun Qi's limits better than him right now. That was why he sounded so certain. Yun Qi immediately fell silent. Jun Zile will definitely beat Meng Duengxi. If you can win your match tomorrow, your next opponent will definitely be Jun Zile. However, Lu Lengchuan's face grew even more serious. You absolutely mustn't underestimate Xue Meiyin either. Meng Duengxi had proven his strength by entering the top 6, but he could do nothing against Xue Meiyin at all. In fact, Xue Meiyin is much scarier than Jun Zile in certain areas. Lengchuan, I'll be careful. Yun Qi nodded, but he didn't actually feel much on the inside. He had witnessed the battle between Xue Meiyin and Meng Duengxi with his own eyes, and he had to agree that her mental powers were extraordinary. Meng Duengxi was powerful, but he was almost completely helpless before her mental powers. If Xue Meiyin hadn't let up in the end, he wouldn't have even noticed that he was mind-controlled past the point of defeat. Although Xue Meiyin couldn't be underestimated, he had 4 types of divine souls in this body. He was at least confident that he wouldn't lose to a little girl in terms of mental power. As for profound strength, Xue Meiyin was without a doubt the weakest out of everyone present. As long as he could suppress her mental attacks, the rest of the battle should be as easy as bullying a 3-year-old. Lu Lengchuan examined Yun Qi's expression shortly before saying, It looks like you're pretty confident about tomorrow's fight. That is good, of course. I still don't think you can beat Jun Zile as you are now, but I definitely look forward to your battle against her. Lu Lengchuan tossed 3 glittering items at Yun Qi after he said this. Yun Qi caught them and gave them a glance. They were 3-time wheel pearls. They are useless to me now, but maybe a few months' time is enough for you to create a miracle. Lu Lengchuan smiled. Yun Qi didn't turn down his offer. He held the time wheel pearls tightly and thanked Lu Lengchuan gratefully. Thank you, Brother Lengchuan. I definitely need these items. You don't have to thank me. Lu Lengchuan turned around before speaking in a low tone. Thank you, Brother Yun. Why are you thanking me? Yun Qi looked confused. There are 2 reasons. Lu Lengchuan sounded rueful when he said this. 1, you purposely separated the 2 suns before you unleashed 9 suns' Heaven's fury, didn't you? Yun Qi looked caught off guard, but he didn't speak up or shake his head in denial. It was true that he had split the 2 overlapping suns right before he threw 9 suns' Heaven's fury. It was also true that its power was diminished as a result. He had used up all of his profound energy at the time, so he had no way of controlling the 2 suns once he unleashed them. It was entirely possible that a full-powered 9 suns' Heaven's fury might kill Lu Lengchuan. The reason he changed his mind at the last moment and did something that went completely against his own objectives was because of Lu Lengchuan's slapping of Lu Chenyuan and the things he said yesterday. I thought so. Lu Lengchuan smiled. You obviously want to win a lot, and yet you still hold yourself back from passing the line of cruelty and ruthlessness. You never brought this up until I asked you about it, which makes it obvious that you're protecting my pride despite possessing unparalleled strength and talent. You also have a good nature. The Eastern Divine Region is lucky to have a genius like you. Yun Qi shook his head. You praise me too much, Brother Lengchuan. I'm sure you can block the attack even if I hadn't done so. Plus, I personally don't think that my nature deserves your praise at all. I've done many ruthless things in the past, and about my final attack, I doubt I'll do that again if I have to repeat myself. Lu Lengchuan smiled noncommittally before continuing. The next thing I want to thank you for is about the fact that I'm about to hit 60 in a couple of years. Thank you for giving me a battle like this at the end of my youth. I no longer have any regrets left in this part of my life. Lu Lengchuan walked away, but not without giving Yun Qi a few more parting words. Feel free to visit Shrouding Sky Realm when you're free. My father praises you a lot, and I'm sure he'll be absolutely delighted to meet you. How many people in the entire Eastern Divine Region had the honor to be praised a lot by the Shrouding Sky Realm King himself? Yun Qi didn't leave immediately. Instead, he stayed where he was silently for a very long time. Far beneath, huh? Yun Qi hit a sigh as he recalled Lu Lengchuan's words. If even the likes of Lu Lengchuan was far beneath Jun Zile, then there was no way he could beat her as he was right now. His only ray of hope was the 6 months of extra time granted by the time wheel pearls in his hands. I must find a way to improve my strength as much as I can in the next 2 days. Yun Qi muttered to himself before glancing at his left hand. As for hunger, her power is lagging behind mine already. I remember that she hasn't finished all the swords Jai Ruyan gave me, but in the end, they are swords from lower star realms. Her power wouldn't improve drastically even if she ate all of them. I guess I must find another way. He looked up into the sky and muttered absent-mindedly. Jasmine, have you seen my fight today? The Eternal Heaven Realm was as quiet as usual. The moment Yun Qi returned to his courtyard, he immediately noticed the master and the disciple Huo Ruli and Huo Poyun. It was obvious that they were waiting for him. Brother Yun, Huo Poyun strode towards him excitedly. The entire Eastern Divine Region has learned that you've beaten Lu Lengchuan. I can't believe I missed the match. I can't even begin to tell you how regretful I'm feeling right now. How are your wounds? Haha, they're fine, it's nothing, Yun Qi said casually. He felt relaxed after judging that Huo Poyun was looking a lot better. Boy Yun, Huo Ruli walked over with a chuckle. Your opponents will only be more and more powerful from this point onwards. They are all the strongest young geniuses of the Eastern Divine Region. No one will question your current achievements, but I'm sure that every one of us are looking forward to you reaching even greater heights. Therefore, you must do your best in your next match. Everything else can wait until after the Profound God Convention. Yun Qi nodded. Don't worry, Sect Master Huo. I will do my best, including Brother Poyun's portion. Brother Yun, Huo Poyun shot Yun Qi an emotional look. Not only did you manage to beat Lu Lengchuan, you even helped spread the glory of our Golden Crow sect. It should have been my duty, but I ultimately failed to live up to everyone's expectations. Haha, do you understand now, Yuner? The Golden Crow flame isn't weak at all. On the contrary, it's very, very powerful. There are none more deserving of the title Strongest Divine Flame than the Golden Crow Flame. Yun Boy's 9 sons, Heaven's Fury, especially stunned those upper star realm fellows so much that they couldn't wipe their expressions off their faces for a very long time, ha-ha-ha. Huo Ruli couldn't control his sense of pride and passion, and laughed loudly the moment he recalled the moment the world became illuminated by golden flames. That was definitely the most famed Golden Crow sect had ever gotten during his lifetime. Amen. Huo Poyun nodded strongly. Brother Yun defeated Lu Lengchuan, a god-child of the Eastern Divine Region with the Golden Crow flames. The entire Eastern Divine Region has borne witness to its power. I finally understand that my defeat at the hands of Jun Zile isn't because the Golden Crow flame isn't strong enough. It's because my cultivation is utterly lacking. To think that I had become depressed for such a ridiculous reason, I must have disappointed you greatly, Master. Ha-ha-ha-ha, Huo Ruli waved his hands smilingly. Of course not. Yuner, Yun Boy was right that day. You're just a young boy, and it's only natural for you to feel lost sometimes. The fact that you managed to escape your depression so quickly only makes me proud and happy for your sake. Why would I ever be disappointed by this? Well, hee-hee, I would have been depressed for much longer if it wasn't for Brother Yun. For the longest time, I thought I was strong enough to hold my own. I even thought that I was good enough to support Flame God Realm's future already. In the end, I guess I was too young and naive. I'll do my best to cultivate harder in the future. I'll cultivate the Golden Crow flames hard and my mind even harder. Huopoyun stretched out his hand and revealed a time wheel pearl. Brother Yun, this is my last time Yun pearl. Please accept this insignificant gift. Yun Chi accepted the time wheel pearl and looked at him firmly. Brother Poyun, just you wait. I'll take back what's yours from Jun Zile, using the Golden Crow flames no less. Huopoyun's eyes flashed once before he nodded firmly. He had obtained 3 time wheel pearls from Lu Lengchuan and 1 from Huopoyun. This meant that Yun Chi had a total of 7 time wheel pearls and could extend 14 hours to 7 months right now. Huo Ruli and Huopoyun soon left the area. Neither of them asked Yun Chi how he came by his Golden Crow bloodline. Huo Ruli's explanation was that he wanted Yun Chi to focus fully in the next few matches. Everything else could wait until afterwards. Yun Chi's eyebrows furrowed a couple of times as he gripped Huopoyun's gift. It was obvious that Huopoyun had pulled himself free from depression and regained his usual spirit, but for some reason he still felt that something was wrong with him. However, he couldn't exactly figure out what was wrong with him either. It was just a feeling. Maybe he hasn't completely walked out of his shadow. Although today's battle has dispelled his doubt about the Golden Crow flame's strength, the defeat was a terrible shock. I guess he still needs more time before he can truly regain himself. It was night. When Huo Ruli returned to his accommodation, he noticed that Huopoyun had been lowering his head and staying silent all this time. Huo Ruli's eyebrows moved. Yuner, Huopoyun jolted slightly before looking up. Ah, what are you thinking about? Are you still regretting that you missed out on Yun Boy's fight against Lu Lengchuan? Huo Ruli smiled. It's okay. Someone must have captured that fight using a profound imagery stone. You will be able to watch it. Huopoyun bit his lips slightly before asking, Master, were you the one who gave Brother Yun his Golden Crow bloodline and Golden Crow divine soul? Of course, this wasn't the first time someone asked him this question. Huo Ruli shook his head immediately. Of course not. Yuner, do you remember? The Golden Crow divine spirit once mentioned that there was another Golden Crow inheritance in a certain place beyond the God realm. Huopoyun looked surprised. Master, are you saying? Huo Ruli nodded. The fact that he's able to unleash such pure and refined Golden Crow flames proves that the Golden Crow blood he bears is no ordinary inheritance. It can only be the Golden Crow origin blood just like you. Huopoyun. The Golden Crow divine spirit presented its final origin blood and divine soul to you, meaning that there is no Golden Crow origin blood or Golden Crow divine soul left in this world. Therefore, his Golden Crow bloodline can only come from the other Golden Crow inheritance. When Huo Ruli looked up, his eyes were shaking with excitement. He sighed. Maybe this is the Golden Crow divine spirit's guidance. Although he isn't a Golden Crow sect disciple, this is the first time the Golden Crow flame was glorious as this in the Eastern Divine region. After today, all Golden Crow sect disciples will come to respect him greatly, and the elders can't stop praising him for his actions. It doesn't actually matter where he came to earn his Golden Crow bloodline now. Ha 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 ha. Huo Ruli laughed to his heart's content. Huopoyun's terrible defeat and depression had made him feel down for a little. But Yun Chi's fight today had opened up so many pores and made him so happy that he literally couldn't describe his emotions. Who knew how many times he had laughed like he did today? Huo Ruli didn't notice that Huopoyun wasn't laughing or smiling alongside him. Instead, the young man looked down to his feet. Master, Huopoyun said, Brother Yun's obviously at the 8th level of the Divine Tribulation realm, but he still managed to defeat Lu Lengchuan with the Golden Crow flames, who's at the 10th level of the Divine Spirit realm. His Golden Crow bloodline must be a lot purer than mine, isn't it? Oh no. But Huo Ruli shook his head and answered seriously, The Golden Crow Divine Spirit once said that you're the next Golden Crow Divine Spirit. This means you have the richest Golden Crow bloodline in the entire world. Yun Chi. Huo Ruli paused for a second before continuing. Yuner, do you remember how Yun Chi blocked your Golden Annihilation and 9 Suns Heaven's Fury head-on and suffered no damage 3 years ago at Snow Song Realm? Huopoyun, I never really understood how he did it until today. Considering his cultivation level that day, It should have been impossible for him to block your golden crow flames, no matter how good he was at commanding ice profound energy. The fact that he was able to resist your power, while being completely unharmed, proves that he has tremendous control over the power of ice and fire, a level that's far higher than yours. Plus, he has the Golden Crow's bloodline in him. This means that it's definitely possible for him to block your Golden Crow flames perfectly. Huo Poyun couldn't say anything for a very long time. I finally understood why Muxunian wanted me to gamble the Golden Crow's record of the burning world that day. It was all for... Huo Ruli shook his head and smiled unconsciously. If he had learned of the truth that day, he would have been absolutely furious with Muxunian. However, his loss had contributed largely to Yunqi's victory. He could only feel pleased and lucky when he thought about this. He actually didn't feel displeased by Muxunian's trickery in the slightest. I see. Huo Poyun muttered before continuing. The Snow Song Realm King took the Golden Crow's record of the burning world from Master because she wanted to give it to Brother Yun. This means that Brother Yun probably hadn't cultivated the Golden Crow's record of the burning world even though he already had its bloodline. If that's true, that means that he was able to unleash Nine Suns' Heaven's Fury, despite cultivating the Golden Crow's record of the burning world for only 3 years. Huo Poyun's words caught Huo Ruli completely off guard. He stopped in his tracks and stared blankly into space for a very long time. Now that you mention it, this kid is seriously a monster. He was the Golden Crow sect master, and he hadn't been able to cultivate Nine Suns' Heaven's Fury despite spending almost 10,000 years trying to do so. Meanwhile, Yunqi took only 3 years to cultivate Nine Suns' Heaven's Fury. 3 measly years. If he didn't love Yunqi to death right now, he would probably choke to death instead. Yes. Huo Poyun said, Brother Yun is just so impressive. It's only today that I realize that I'm incomparable to him in every way. Actually, I should say that I'm not even qualified to be a comparison. To think I would be so foolish as to think that I'm. Ha, now, you shouldn't undervalue yourself so much, Yuner. Yunqi is an absolute monster that surprised even the God Emperors. This God-conferred battle will definitely make him famous throughout the entire God realm, and there's no praise that he doesn't deserve. He's the kind of monster that may not show up even in 100,000 years after all. You don't need to compare yourself to him. You only need to know that you will always be my greatest pride. Huo Poyun sucked in a deep breath. Don't worry, Master. I won't disappoint you any longer. Good. Your promise gladdens me considerably, Yuner. MN, speaking of which, that Yun boy has the Golden Crow bloodline even though isn't a member of our Golden Crow sect, and now the entire Eastern Divine region knows about it. The two of you are best friends, and I'm fond of him too, so I guess we can call him half a member of the Golden Crow sect. To think that our Golden Crow sect will be fortunate enough to welcome both of you into its fold. I, Huo Ruli, can meet my ancestors with a smile even if I were to die right away. Ha 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 ha. Huo Ruli laughed loudly as he strode back into his room. Even an idiot could see that his feelings couldn't get any better than this. A surge of irritation suddenly rose from the bottom of Huo Poyun's heart as he stared at Huo Ruli's departing back. He went out of the courtyard with a heavy heart to take a walk, unaware of the passage of time or where he was headed to until he nearly ran into an ancient tree. Sigh. Huo Poyun stopped in his tracks and smiled mockingly at himself. He shook his head and looked at the sky with clear regret. My master's praise, my peers' admiration, and fame throughout the entire divine Eastern region, Brother Yun rightfully deserves all these. He even inherited my will and kept the Golden Crow flames burning on the God-conferred stage. I should be happy, gratified, and honored by his deeds. He even thinks of me as a friend. He's the first person who came over to console me when I fell into depression. I can definitely see that he's trying to help me regain my confidence by beating Lu Lengchuan with the Golden Crow flames as well. Brother Yun is undoubted a proud son of God, and yet he was never an arrogant or insincere person. I'm truly lucky to be able to make a friend like him, but as his friend, to think that I was so jealous of him just now. He exhaled deeply before continuing. It seems that my cultivation of the mind is far behind my cultivation of the profound way. I probably don't even deserve to call him my brother the way I am right now. After breathing the air outside for a very long time, Huo Poyun was finally able to muster a smile. The walk had made him feel a lot better. Yunqi's Golden Crow flames had stunned the entire Eastern Divine region. Huo Ruli, Yan Juhai, and the elders only had endless praise for him. Even the disciples of all three flame god sects couldn't hold back their respect and admiration when they were speaking of Xianxia. All these factors had undoubtedly caused an uncontrollable spurt of jealousy inside his heart. Had Xianxia won all this using any other power, he would only be happy for him and cheer for him from the bottom of his heart. However, the power he used was the Golden Crow Flame. Hu Poyan, was the one who had the richest Golden Crow bloodline and Golden Crow divine soul. He was the one who was supposed to become Flame God Realm's hope and future. He was the one who was supposed to burn the brightest Golden Crow flame to ever exist. For the longest time, he had believed that he was one and only. He had never felt such a smothering pressure and jealousy in his life until today. It made him afraid, ashamed, and disgusted with himself. His emotions also made him realize that he was sorely lacking in the mind department. His emotional issues slightly resolved, Hu Poyan turned around and got ready to return. It was at this moment two white figures dressed in Ice Phoenix snow robes suddenly walked over from the distance. They were obviously Ice Phoenix disciples, and they were chatting excitedly about something. Everyone's talking about senior brother Yun right now. To think that he would actually beat Lu Lengchuan, SSS, it still feels like a dream, honestly. Yeah, did you notice that the upper star realm people we ran into earlier were looking at us with different eyes? It's not just a dream, it's a dream I wouldn't even dare to imagine. Haha, speaking of which, do you remember the time the sect master took in senior brother Yun as her direct disciple and gifted senior sister Feixu as his dual cultivation partner? At first I thought it was a shame that the great elder and senior sister Feixu had to deal with Xianxia. But now, Tusk, I can't believe I was stupid enough to doubt our sect master. But of course, our sect master is beyond amazing. Suddenly, Hu Poyan stopped in his tracks and shuddered like he was just struck by lightning. It took him a very long time before he was finally moved and walked away in silence. However, his footsteps looked a tad floaty. Xianxia completely healed from his injuries and recovered his profound strength inside the Time Wheel Pearl. Afterwards, he immediately deactivated the Time Wheel Barrier instead of choosing to cultivate inside it. It was almost impossible for him to raise his profound strength to the same level as Junzile just by cultivating for a few months. He had to make the best use of the 7 Time Wheel Pearls in his possession before his fight against Junzile. Otherwise, it would be waste of them. The night passed by quietly as Xianxia adjusted his state to its peak. When he opened his eyes, it was bright outside. His battle on this day had come so soon, and his opponent was Shui Meiyan. Perceiving the change in his aura, Mu Bingyun came over to his side. "The time for your battle is near. Let's go." Xianxia got up and said as he thought of something, "Palace Master Bingyun, Brother Poyan's condition still didn't seem to be in a good condition yesterday, so I'll go over to take a look at him. It would naturally be the best if I can get him over to the competition site to watch the battle." "That's all right." Mu Bingyun nodded her head. She had already realized during this time period that Xianxia really considered Hu Poyan his friend and was very concerned about him getting disheartened because of Junzile. Xianxia came over to the residence of the Flame God Realm, but he was not able to sense Hu Poyan's aura. "Oh, Senior Brother Poyan has already gone to the Conferred God stage, along with Sect Master, quite a while ago," a Golden Crow sect disciple, who was staying behind in the residence, told him. There was a look of worship in his eyes as he informed Xianxia. The look of worship in his eyes was absolutely much more intense than when facing Hu Poyan. "I see." As Xianxia was about to leave, the Golden Crow sect disciple called out, as he found it difficult to suppress his excitement. "Yes, sir. Xianxia, best of luck in your Conferred God battle today." Xianxia soared into the sky as he made his way to the Conferred God stage by himself. Hu Poyan had finally gone to the audience seating area today along with Hu Ruli, which made it seem as if he had come out of his depression. But Xianxia didn't feel relaxed in the least, and he became even more worried instead. Looking at the extremely passionate look in that Golden Crow sect disciple's eyes had made him think of something all of a sudden. "Sigh." Xianxia let out a light sigh. He talked to himself. Seriously, these youngsters. He appeared to have forgotten that his current biological age was even lower than Hu Poyan's. As he drew closer to the Conferred God stage area, a group of 3 flew over from another direction. Xianxia was immediately startled when he cast a sideways glance in their direction. The one leading the group was actually none other than Shui Yingyu. The most eye-catching among the 3 people, that subconsciously made others look at her first, was an exquisite and petite girl of tender age who was dressed in black skirt. It was his opponent on this day, Shui Meiyan. The third person was a youth in blue. His face was fair and clear and had delicate features, but he still looked heroic despite that. When Yun-Chi saw the group of three, Shui Meiyan also caught sight of him. She moved her beautiful eyes in a circle before suddenly pulling her elder sister as she flew straight to Yun-Chi. "Big brother Yun-Chi," Shui Meiyan's fine eyebrows curved as she waved her little hand at Yun-Chi. "What a coincidence! We meet again." It is indeed quite a coincidence. This heaven-favored girl, who was the focus of attention of the people throughout the world, had surprisingly taken the initiative to come over and chat with him. Yun-Chi had no idea how to respond in such a situation. Shui Meiyan slightly raised her face as her starry eyes twinkled. "Big brother Yun-Chi, your performance was truly awesome in the fight with brother Lengchuan yesterday. I worship you so much." Yun-Chi was startled. He noticed that Shui Yingyu and the youth who were with Shui Meiyan were completely taken aback at her words, and even the expressions in their eyes seemed to have changed. Seeing the clear look of disbelief on Yun-Chi's face, Shui Meiyan pursed her tender lips. "I'm telling you the truth. Moreover, this is my first time sincerely worshipping someone. It's because big brother Yun-Chi is truly so awesome." "Oh, that's right." Shui Meiyan moved a bit to the side. "This is my big sister. You must have seen her before." Shui Yingyu slightly nodded towards Yun-Chi. There was no doubt that the look in her eyes while looking at Yun-Chi was completely different from the first time she saw him. "He is my 99th big brother." Shui Meiyan pointed to the youth. 99th big brother also participated in this session of the Profound God Convention, but was defeated in the third round of the preliminaries. He is so much worse than big brother Yun-Chi and can't be compared to even your little finger. The identity of the youth was naturally extraordinary for him to be able to travel with Shui Yingyu and Shui Meiyan. He could have acted proud in front of Yun-Chi given his identity as a son of the glazed Light Realm King. But his noble and towering presence was instantly reduced to nothingness by the remark Shui Meiyan made. He said to Yun-Chi with an awkward expression, "Cough, this humble one is Shui Yinghan, the 99th son of my royal father. Watching little brother Yun's battle yesterday broadened the horizons of this humble one. So it's the 99th young master of the glazed Light Realm. I'm very pleased to meet you." Yun-Chi returned the greeting as he sighed with emotion in his heart. If it was before the Profound God Convention, how was it possible for a proud person of the glazed Light Realm, a peak-level upper star realm, to even spare a glance at a person from a middle star realm? But now, not only did a son of the glazed Light Realm King take the initiative to talk to him, but he even called himself this humble one. He had an impression of Shui Yinghan. He vaguely remembered that he was one of the 1,000 heaven-chosen children, but was not able to pass the third round inside the Eternal Heaven Tower, and consequently was unable to enter the conferred God battle. Considering how Shui Meiyan roasted him without any mercy just now, it appeared to be quite a disgrace to this 99th young master of the glazed Light Realm. "Big brother Yun-Chi, your opponent today is me, so you need to be careful." Shui Meiyan's eyebrows curved as she revealed a sweet and lovely smile. She didn't seem as if she was facing an opponent in the least. "Same goes for you," Yun-Chi replied. "However," the girl slightly moved her starry eyes as she said smilingly, "it doesn't look like you are completely unworried about losing to me." "No," Yun-Chi shook his head. "I have never underestimated my opponent, and it is even more so in your case." Shui Meiyan blinked her eyes. She wore a serious face as she pointed her nose and lips up a bit and said in a certain tone, "But do you really think so in your heart?" Shui Meiyan's eyes looked pure like crystals, however. They had the same depth to them as a dark night. It seemed as if she could directly see through a person's soul. Yun-Chi was definitely not taking Shui Meiyan lightly, but as he was extremely confident in his mental power, he had never thought of the possibility of him losing to Shui Meiyan, not even subconsciously. After winning the battle against Lu Lengchuan the previous day, he had spent the whole night racking his brain to come up with a way to win against Jun Zile. He almost didn't bother thinking about how he was going to fight his battle with Shui Meiyan. Looking at Shui Meiyan's pitch-black eyes and hearing the surety in her tone, he suddenly grew wary of her in the depths of his heart for the first time. Furthermore, it was an extremely strong feeling of wariness. "Ha ha," Shui Meiyan lightly laughed at this time all of a sudden. Her laughter sounded quite lovely. "I may be younger in age and such a cute girl, but you might find it even more difficult to deal with me than big brother Lengchuan. Big brother needs to be extremely careful." "All right." Shui Yingyu pulled Shui Meiyan by the hand and slightly glanced at Yun-Chi. The time for the battle to start is near, so let's be on our way. Amen. Shui Meiyin pulled her elder sister's hand. Big brother Yun-Chi, we'll meet again in a bit. The pair of sisters slowly flew away, one dressed in black, the other blue. As the sleeves of their robes fluttered in the wind, they appeared like two butterflies dancing in the air, which was quite a delightful sight, to say the least. Shui Yinghen's figure, however, came to a stop in the sky. He suddenly turned around and told Yun-Chi in a low voice, with a stern expression on his face, "Hey, I must warn you not to think that you will be able to defeat my little sister just because you defeated Lu Lengchuan. My little sister is a monstrous girl that is several thousand times more capable and fearsome than what she has shown, or you can imagine. You barely managed to keep your life to get that brilliant victory yesterday, so try not to be thoroughly destroyed today." Yun-Chi was slightly stunned. He said while nodding, "I thank the 99th young master for the warning. It's good if you understand." Having finished his words, he surprisingly drew a bit closer instead of leaving. He also lowered his voice a lot. "Well, you see, I warned you out of kindness, so shouldn't you, repay me for it? During your fight with Lu Lengchuan yesterday, how did you pull off that God manifestation illusion divine art?" Yun-Chi, it isn't the true God manifestation illusion divine art, right? Royal Father told me that it is only after reaching the divine master realm that one is able to use it to its utmost ability. Why did someone such as you, who is just at the divine tribulation realm, succeed in doing it? Is there some trick to it? Is it difficult to learn? 99th big brother, hurry up. Shui Meiyin's voice was heard from far, far away. Shui Yingyu promptly turned his head around, as if he had heard an imperial edict, and after a moment of hesitation, immediately flew in the direction of the voice. At the same time, he didn't forget to leave a few words for Yun-Chi. "Later. Let's talk about it again later." When Yun-Chi arrived at the conferred god stage, he immediately caught sight of Huo Poyun. Huo Poyun also saw him coming over and stood up to welcome him. "Brother Poyun, you have finally come. It seems that you have definitely thought through a lot of things," Yun-Chi said with a faint smile. However, Huo Poyun shook his head in response and let out a bitter laugh. "If I speak the truth, it would only sound like a joke to Brother Yun. Yesterday, I also once believed that I had broken free from the obstacles set up by my inner demons, but—" Sigh. Huo Poyun let out a light sigh as a perplexed look surfaced in his eyes. "I clearly know that I'm under the influence of a heart demon, but I'm still utterly incapable of getting rid of it. I clearly know that I should not be thinking so pessimistically, but I'm still unable to change my way of thinking. It is only after arriving at the eternal heaven realm that I discovered I'm actually a useless person." "Ha ha ha," Yun-Chi unexpectedly laughed at his words. "Brother Poyun, do you still remember my words? Don't treat your inner demon as a bad thing. On the contrary, this is something one must experience in their life. Once you pass through this phase, you will be able to have a brand new perspective of heaven and earth." "Amen." Huo Poyun nodded heavily. "I won't let myself continue to be in such a disgraceful state. Brother Yun, you will be able to enter the ranks of the top 4 after winning your battle today. You will be able to become part of the 4 conferred god children. I remember the voice of eternal heaven saying that the top 4 contestants will be given special rewards by the 4 great king realms. Therefore, you have to do your best. You must emerge victorious." Of course, it was the 6th round of the losers group that was to be held this day, and a total of 2 battles would be fought. Following the announcement by Honorable Kui, the conferred god battles for this day began quickly. In the first battle, it was a face-off between Jun Zile and Meng Duengxi. Nothing suspenseful or unexpected happened during this battle, and Jun Zile easily won after only using 6 sword attacks. Meng Duengxi has lost, and his journey in the conferred god battle will stop here. Jun Zile has won, and she will be participating in the 7th round of the losers group 3 days from now. We will now have the second battle of the 6th round of the losers group. Shui Meiyin of the Glazed Light Realm versus Yun-Chi of the Snow Song Realm. As soon as Honorable Kui made the announcement, the gazes of everyone present, including the great god emperors, star gods, moon gods, and guardians, focused on Yun-Chi right away. This scene alone was enough to manifest the enormous influence Yun-Chi possessed after his battle the previous day. Mu Bingyun spoke 5 words of warning. "You must be extremely careful. Brother Yun, I suggest you suppress her with your profound strength as soon as possible, once the battle starts, so that she doesn't get the chance to execute her mental attacks," Huo Poyun said in a low voice. Yun-Chi slightly nodded his head. He flew up into the air and landed on the conferred god stage, facing Shui Meiyin, who was standing quite far away. Vermilion rays of light flashed, after which the heaven-smiting sword appeared in his hand, though he hadn't moved his profound energy yet. Compared to the serious look in his eyes, and him preparing himself for the battle, Shui Meiyin had both of her hands behind her back. Her delicate fingers were still dexterously fiddling with the butterfly-shaped knot that was tied around her slim waist. There was a faint, beautiful smile on her face that made others feel no tension or deterrence at all. The audience seating area was particularly quiet, as everyone looked at the stage with bated breath. It was because no one dared to predict the outcome of this face-off. There was no doubt that Yun Qi had great strength, and it could be said that the whole eastern divine region was stunned by his performance in the battle the previous day. Shui Meiyin, however, was an extremely special existence. Her profound strength was only at the first level of the divine spirit realm. Although it was an absolutely world-shaking cultivation for someone of her age, it was undoubtedly at the bottom level among the participants of the conferred god battle. She had not faced a single defeat so far in the conferred god battle, except for the one time when she took the initiative to admit defeat in her battle against Shui Yingyu. Moreover, she was able to win each of her battles quite easily. At the same time, she had never used her profound strength to fight until now, and instead relied entirely on her extremely high-level movement skill and her incomparably extraordinary mental power. Besides, the two of them had the lowest profound strengths among the 32 conferred god candidates, and even the 1,000 heaven-chosen children. One was at the first level of the divine spirit realm, the other at the 8th level of the divine tribulation realm. Despite having such low cultivations, these two had surprisingly trampled on all their opponents in the late stage of divine spirit realm, and they were now going to fight for a position among the final 4 of the competition. There was no doubt that it was a great, miraculous spectacle to see such people facing each other at this stage in the history of the conferred god battle. As Yun Qi was staring fixedly at her, Shui Meiyin tilted her head to the side. Her charming eyes narrowed into the shape of crescent moons, as a very soft and light soul voice transmitted inside his mind. "Big brother Yun Qi, be careful. Begin." The moment Honorable Kui's voice resounded like a thunderclap, Yun Qi rushed ahead, while unleashing all of his profound energy, like an arrow that had just left the bowstring. He had the same plan as Hu Poyan, to suppress her with his absolutely superiority in energy and give her no chance to make use of her mental power. Yun Qi to charge. A blue profound image immediately emerged before her and formed a small-scale profound formation that was shining with aqua-blue light. Bang! Yun Qi's profound energy surged ahead like waves as he tried to suppress his opponent, and the sound produced by the blast of aura was quite heavy too. However, he was unable to suppress Shui Meiyin. He saw her figure slowly disappearing after a flash of the blue light from the profound formation. Next, her aura came from quite a distant place high above in the sky. Illusory butterfly dance, just as expected of a top-level movement art that even Shui Yingyu failed to cultivate successfully. It is indeed extraordinary. Yun Qi praised her skill in his heart. Judging from how Shui Meiyin was so easily able to escape from his suppression, and even instantly broke free from his aura that was locked onto her. Her illusory butterfly dance was absolutely not inferior to the moon-splitting cascade. Of course, it was only comparable to a moon-splitting cascade that had not reached the realm of great perfection. Yun Qi quickly locked his aura onto Shui Meiyin once again, but Shui Meiyin had begun her counterattack at this time. As she waved her little hand, illusory mental butterfly language radiated with blue light. A water curtain instantly spread all over the sky before turning over and falling down. Ice attribute profound arts were derived from the water attribute, but they were overall better than pure water attribute profound arts with respect to offense, control, and defense. The only demerit of using such an art was the difficulty in executing it. Therefore, 90% of the profound practitioners who were proficient in water attribute arts used ice attribute profound arts, while only an extremely low number of people practiced pure water attribute arts. The main profound art of the glazed light realm, Billowing Star Bestowal, was also a pure water attribute profound art. However, considering that such a profound art was the main art of one of the 3 strongest star realms below the king realms, it was easily understandable that it was absolutely impossible for it to be compared with ordinary water attribute profound arts. But no matter whether it was an ice attribute or a water attribute, profound art. It posed no threat at all to Xianxia, who had water spirit evil body. Besides, although the water curtain might seem huge, it didn't have the slightest bit of deterrent force. Xianxia leapt up as he casually swung his sword. Right after, a tearing sound was heard as the water curtain, that had covered the whole sky, was torn open as easily as a cotton or silk cloth, and revealed the azure sky that had been hidden by it for a short while, however. Another water curtain suddenly descended upon him before he could even catch sight of Shui Meiyan's figure and blocked his field of vision again. It was also at this moment that Shui Meiyan's aura disappeared all of a sudden. Xianxia was taken aback. He was about to tear open the water curtain again when he suddenly raised his brows. Something's odd. Xianxia suddenly came to a stop as his figure stood still in midair, his profound energy drifting around his body. He then slowly closed both of his eyes, and his consciousness swiftly submerged inside the sea of his mind. It was actually quite dangerous to have one's consciousness submerged during a fight on the conferred God stage. However, Xianxia not only submerged his consciousness, he even submerged as much as 80% of it within the sea of his mind, only leaving 20% to respond to the outside world. There was no doubt that he was full of openings at this moment. There were stars twinkling in the space inside his soul. The whole place was quiet and nothing unusual could be noticed. But Xianxia didn't show any signs of withdrawing his consciousness. Instead, he focused his mind as golden rays of light flashed all of a sudden. The golden crow divine soul transformed into a huge divine image of the golden crow, craned its neck, and let out a long cry, which immediately turned Xianxia's soul world into a sea of fire. In an instant, countless small, exquisite, and agile black butterflies became visible amidst the firelight. And then, they got quickly burned and annihilated as they dispersed away in all directions. These black butterflies had already entered his mind some time ago, and were completely undetectable until he unleashed the power of the golden crow divine soul. "Oh my!" A girl's clear and melodious cry of surprise resounded inside the sea of fire. "Big brother, you're so awesome. I didn't expect you to discover them so soon." "No, actually, I didn't really discover them," Xianxia said slowly. "It's just that you made a little careless mistake when you used your enchantment. The color of the sky here in Eternal Heaven Realm is pale white, but the sky I saw just now looked a bit azure. It was then that I realized that I had fallen under your enchantment at some point in time." "Eh, is that so?" The girl talked to herself in a low voice. Xianxia had spoken in a very calm voice, but he was in fact feeling inwardly nervous. He raised his vigilance to the limit as a sense of crisis rushed through the depths of his consciousness. He had personally witnessed Meng Duangxi suffering a crushing defeat under the influence of Shui Meiyan's soul power. He had no idea that he had fallen into Shui Meiyan's charm until the moment of his defeat. Although he was amazed upon seeing the extraordinary power of her soul, he had absolute confidence that he wouldn't end up in as miserable state as Meng Duangxi given his strong mental power. At the least, he would not fall into her enchantment without even being aware of it. But at this moment, he suddenly realized how terrifying Shui Meiyan's soul power was. When they were fighting, he had made sure to be as alert as possible, so that he could fully ward off her incoming soul attacks, and even launch a counterattack if possible. But just now, if he hadn't submerged his consciousness inside his mind, he would have been completely unable to sense that the world inside his mind had been invaded. It was still fine if his mind was invaded when he was totally unprepared against the invasion. But the scary thing was that he was clearly prepared to deal with any and all mind invasions. Could it be that her soul power could actually ignore the defense of the soul and enter the soul world without any kind of restriction? Big brother, you've guessed it. While Xianxia was bewildered, a light laugh suddenly resounded inside the world of his mind. "My soul has a strange name, Divine Stainless Soul. Daddy said that it was born after being tainted by the primordial power. It is the purest soul inside the primal chaos and has a certain level of affinity with all non-evil souls. Therefore, it can very easily invade others' soul worlds. Big brother's soul is really, really strong, but was still invaded so easily by me. This shows that Big brother actually possesses a very pure soul, divine stainless soul. Was it also born from the most primitive, primordial energy, just like the divine stainless body that Mu Xunian had mentioned before? Pure my soul doesn't deserve this word." Having finished his words, he was startled all of a sudden. Soon after, his soul voice lowered, "You can see my thoughts?" The girl again laughed beautifully. It's because I'm right now inside your soul world. How fearsome it was for someone to know what you were thinking at any time. If things went on like this, she would very likely be able to invade his memories too. Note: the soul world is the world inside the soul, and the mind world is the world inside the mind. Furthermore, apparently the soul resides inside the mind. Yun-Chi's mind world grew tense once again as he said in a heavy voice, "All right, in that case, I will first drive you out of my mind." Boom, boom. Flames exploded inside Yun-Chi's mind world as a sky-shocking phoenix cry resounded. Every strand of Yun-Chi's mental power transformed into exploding golden crow flames, which made his whole mind world turn completely into a sea of fire. The golden crow divine soul seemed as fierce as golden crow divine flames, as it burned and annihilated all foreign things within the mind world, without exception. But there were countless black butterflies dancing gracefully in the midst of the sea of fire that extended throughout the area. As they burned, one by one, and were exterminated inside the sea of fire, more and more new butterflies entered to replace them. Not only did the black butterflies not get fully exterminated by the blazing golden flame, their numbers grew instead as they gradually flew towards the even deeper soul world. Yun-Chi stirred his thoughts at once. In a split second, a change happened in the sea of fire. The flames burning everywhere suddenly transformed into countless swiftly flying butterflies that were made of flames and rushed in the direction of the black butterflies as they burned fiercely. He had used Red Butterfly Domain, the strongest killing move of the Golden Crow's soul power. Back then, Yun-Chi had solely relied on Red Butterfly Domain to annoy the hell out of the enormous Black Soul Divine Sect. It made each and every person of the sect anxious as they trembled with fear. Wow, big brother, your soul power can actually materialize into such beautiful butterflies. So awesome. Yun-Chi accumulated his entire soul power, and his mind grew tense. But Shui Meiyan's carefree, tender, and clear sound came from within his soul world. Her voice sounded joyous as if she had seen something nice, without the slightest sign of nervousness or cautiousness that one would show during a battle between souls. She was evidently quite relaxed. The soul power of Red Butterfly Domain was extremely domineering. Once it was unleashed, it could easily burn and destroy the mind of a divine way profound practitioner in an instant. But the butterflies made of flames were unable to burn and annihilate the black butterflies immediately. They were in a tangle with their targets for a short time, and Yun-Chi's soul world sometimes brightened and other times darkened as the groups of butterflies danced around disorderly. It was bizarrely quiet on the conferred God stage. Yun-Chi was standing still in midair with his eyes closed, without budging an inch. Shui Meiyan was less than 30 steps away behind him. She had her starry eyes narrowed as she also stayed completely still. They are fiercely competing using their mental powers. Meiyan has the divine stainless soul, so if someone forcibly fights against it with their mental power. Shui Yingyu had an unconcerned look in her beautiful eyes, as if she already knew the outcome. Even Luo Changsheng is absolutely not her opponent when it comes to a fight between souls, so there is no doubt that Yun-Chi will lose for sure. The glazed light realm king also nodded his head slightly. Shui Meiyan was born with a variant soul, and no one knew better than him, her father, about how terrifying her mental power was. Even if Yun-Chi discovered that his soul had been invaded, he should still try to win against her using his absolutely superior battle power. It was extremely unwise of him to dare to have a frontal confrontation with her using his soul power. The mighty force of the Golden Crow was constantly emitting from Yun-Chi. It would sometimes grow strong, other times weak, making it apparent that he was utilizing the Golden Crow divine soul. Soon after, an ice-gold coercion suddenly added to the mighty force of the Golden Crow. Yun-Chi had actually unleashed the Ice Phoenix divine soul too. Having to use two divine souls at the same time caused Yun-Chi's body to tremble faintly. On the other hand, Shui Meiyan's eyes were slightly narrowed as the hem of her skirt fluttered in the wind. She looked calm and quiet as if she was dreaming, and it was totally impossible to tell whether she was really using her soul power. Inside Yun-Chi's soul world, red butterflies danced around as the Ice Phoenix let out a long cry. A blue light and flame butterflies blocked and exterminated the black butterflies that were invading from some unknown place. But as if there was no end to the black butterflies, their numbers didn't decrease all this time, no matter how Yun-Chi resisted them. I don't believe that a little girl like you who has yet to wean can have a tougher mental power than me. Yun Qi let out a low roar in his heart as his mental power surged even more fiercely. HMPH, you are a little girl who has yet to wean. Let me show you how awesome I am. A dissatisfied snort of the girl resounded as soon as the thought crossed Yun Qi's mind, and she immediately launched her revenge attack 2. The black butterflies dancing about began to shine with faint pitch-black light, as a far greater oppressive feeling than before suddenly emitted from them, and darkened the glow of the golden crow divine soul and the ice phoenix divine soul at the same time. Yun Qi was frightened in his heart again. Don't tell me that she had still not used her full power. The black butterflies lightly flew across the place and destroyed the flame butterflies at a fast speed. They had invaded nearly 30% of the space inside Yun Qi's soul in less than 10 odd breaths' time. Furthermore, they were occupying more and more area, bit by bit. The soul world began to shake due to the unrest caused by them, and the shaking grew increasingly stronger with time. It was at this time that all the black butterflies flew away in all directions all of a sudden, and disappeared without a trace in a blink of an eye. As the black butterflies dispersed, an unrealistically beautiful picture scroll speared before Yun Qi's eyes. He saw high and towering mountains, faintly discernible clouds and mist, the vast firmament, stars and moons existing together on the picture scroll. In the midst of the boundless heaven and earth, the feeling of being a nobody rose of itself within him. Gradually, the high mountains as well as clouds and mist moved away into the distance, and there seemed to be no end to the firmament, which made him feel as if his existence was becoming more and more insignificant, even more insignificant, insignificant like a stone, insignificant like dust, so insignificant as if he almost didn't exist. Yun Qi was deeply shocked. His was rapidly losing the feeling of existence, and he had no way to stop it. He was very clear that his soul would have been completely invaded when he completely lost the feeling of existence. At that time, he would be under Shui Meiyan's control, and she could do whatever she wanted to him. He immediately began to struggle, but it was all to no avail no matter how hard he tried. It was such a fearsome feeling, as if he was a boat that was vainly trying to prevent itself from capsizing in the ocean. With the passage of time, even the existence of the golden crow divine soul and the ice phoenix divine soul also grew weaker to such an extent that they were almost undetectable. How is this possible? I have so many kinds of divine souls, and my mental power far exceeds an ordinary person, so how can I be so simply and thoroughly suppressed that I'm totally helpless against her? She is clearly just a 15-year-old girl. The more he struggled, the weaker his existence felt. His consciousness was becoming cloudy at an absolutely fearsome speed. I can't let this go on. It seems that I have to unleash the dragon soul, otherwise. Dragon soul, you also have a dragon soul. Shui Meiyan's light cry of surprise resounded in his mind. Yun Qi not only had a dragon soul, it was also extremely special. It was the sole dragon god soul in the primal chaos. This thing was one of his most powerful life-saving cards, so unless he was completely out of options, he would certainly not use the dragon soul while everyone was looking at the conferred god stage. However, Shui Meiyan's soul power was countless times more fearsome than his expectations. If he didn't use the dragon soul now, he would definitely face a miserable defeat. When Yun Qi was about to unleash the dragon soul with all his might, a thought suddenly crossed his mind. Wait a minute. She can see my thoughts whenever she wants. Yun Qi completely gave up on resisting with his mental power all of a sudden, allowing Shui Meiyan's soul power to invade his mind without any restraint. At this time, a gorgeous scene appeared inside his mind. Illusory Demon Realm, Golden Crow Lightning Flame Valley. Inside the barrier set up by the Golden Crow's soul, the beautiful clothes of the little demon empress and Feng Zuer were lying completely torn on the ground, and they didn't have a single thing on their bodies as they tightly entwined themselves around Yun Qi. Sometimes little demon empress would ride him, other times Feng Zuer would. Sometimes Yun Qi would make them get on each other as he did them, other times they would bury their heads in his crotch at the same time. The two perfect jade-like bodies that seemed to shine like stars or moons were doing the most obscene things in this world with Yun Qi. Bang! Yun Qi's soul world violently shook, after which he heard the highest-pitched girl's scream of his life. Ah! Children, when the young girl cried out, the merciless soul pressure that had been stripping Yun Qi's of his sense of existence also dissipated suddenly like a burst dam. Spirit abruptly returned to Yun Qi's eyes as the Golden Crow Divine Soul and Ice Phoenix Divine Soul broke out of their forced slumber in unison. The infinitely vast space of his soul world began glowing with brilliant gold and blue once more. Why? Although Shui Meiyan was young, she possessed a transcendent divine stainless soul. This meant that she was born with a sense of superiority and nobility that came naturally to her. That was why she could act and smile confidently before the strongest experts of the Eastern divine region, unlike other young profound practitioners. However, the young girl sounded absolutely panicked right now. Not a bit of calmness was left in her voice. Although she had a special soul that allowed her to look down on all living things, she was a completely blank paper when it came to her experience in the ways of men and women. In this regard, she was at least 10,000 Shui Yangyus behind Yun Qi. Even more treacherous were the scenes Yun Qi had specifically chosen to recall. Anyone, be it Shui Meiyan's mother or a prostitute who had countless sexual experiences in their lives, would have turned red with embarrassment if they were in Shui Meiyan's position, much less a pure 15-year-old young girl. Even better, Shui Meiyan's consciousness was inside Yun Qi's soul space right now, which meant that she had a near-perfect view and sensation of his dirty thoughts. One might say that it was a huge blow to her soul, to say the least. After Shui Meiyan's soul energy crumbled on its own, Yun Qi instantly counterattacked and dispelled the layers of pressure in the blink of an eye. How could you bad person? The young girl's words were shaky, nonsensical, and panicky to the point where she was on the brink of tears. What are you saying? What did I do? Yun Qi replied innocently. I was just recalling scenes of me and my wives loving each other, that's all. Is there anything wrong with that? Oh no, don't tell me you peeped on those memories too. You're not one of those bad girls, are you? Shui Meiyan's soul was practically shaking after Yun Qi had blasphemed her soul and then dumped the blame on her. You are the bad person. You are a bad person. Why I'm telling my sister about this. I'm really angry now. Shui Meiyan forced herself to concentrate and stopped her soul energy from collapsing in just a short time, filling Yun Qi's entire soul space with tremendous pressure once more. This time, though, a delicate figure slowly appeared before Yun Qi. It was none other than Shui Meiyan herself. Somehow, she was able to manifest herself in Yun Qi's soul space. A sea of black butterflies flew behind her, filling up more than half of Yun Qi's soul space. Although the dancing insects looked ephemerally beautiful and enigmatic, Yun Qi actually felt like the sky was about to collapse on him. His heart and soul froze for just an instant. The pressure was so powerful, so terrible, that Yun Qi was almost certain that his consciousness would be completely crushed if it was allowed to fall on him. Obviously, Shui Meiyan had gotten angry. She had never been blasphemed in her life, much less in such a shameless and intimate way. Black butterflies filled the sky. The ice phoenix and golden crow's soul images quickly turned pale and colorless once more. Shui Meiyan's soul energy definitely far exceeded his expectations. He had always been confident in his mental strength, but the reality was that Shui Meiyan had wiped the floor with him, especially when she had started going all out. Even struggling had become a near impossibility. If she was this powerful at this age, he literally couldn't imagine what she might become in the future. Unfortunately for Shui Meiyan, she was just too young. Yun Qi knew her greatest weakness now. Yun Qi didn't put up any resistance despite facing the full power and fury of Shui Meiyan. Just as the young girl cried out and the black butterflies shone black, the instant the soul energy came crashing down on Yun Qi, a girl suddenly appeared in his mind. She was a young girl wearing a black dress with black butterflies sewn to her slender waist. She had pupils as dark as the night, the countenance of an angel, and a purity that was comparable to that to a spirit. It was none other than Shui Meiyan herself. The girl was standing there doing nothing, when a Yun Qi suddenly appeared out of nowhere and pushed her down on the ground. He then tore apart her clothes mercilessly and revealed a delicate and pitiable snow-white body. The entire soul space shuddered, and the skyful of black butterflies suddenly froze in their tracks. The real Shui Meiyan's pupils instantly widened. You! She was just about to shout angrily at Yun Qi when her voice suddenly died. Then a scream several times longer and more frightened than the one before burst out of her throat. In that scene, Yun Qi had lifted her all too delicate body into the air, locked her in an incredibly embarrassing position, and rammed his waist straight against hers. Before she could recover from her shock, Yun Qi had turned her around into an even more embarrassing pose before ravishing her from behind. The young girl's cries filled every corner of the soul world. The glowing black butterflies fell into confusion before they started crumbling in droves. Not only was Yun-Chi's method shameless beyond compare, the timing of his execution was also incredibly treacherous. He had chosen the exact moment Shui Meiyin unleashed her full power to play the scene in his head. As a result, Shui Meiyin's soul attack hadn't just crumbled, it had backlashed harshly against her soul too. At the same time, Yun-Chi summoned all of his soul energy and threw it against her. The Golden Crow and Ice Phoenix divine souls exploded at the same time and filled the entire soul space with fire and ice. Shui Meiyin had lost control completely, and Yun-Chi had seized the opportunity to counterattack with his full power. As a result, Yun-Chi successfully overturned what should have been a completely one-sided victory, as Shui Meiyin's soul figure turned blurry due to the backlash, before vanishing entirely. On the conferred god stage, Yun-Chi suddenly opened his eyes and unleashed his profound energy. He pounced towards Shui Meiyin like a meteor and trapped her inside profound energy right away. The consequence of a soul rebound was far worse than a profound energy rebound of the same level. If the rebound was severe, it might even deal irreversible damage to one's soul. Therefore, Shui Meiyin had no way to accumulate profound energy while her soul was in chaos. By the time she let out her scream and fell heavily on her butt, Yun-Chi had already completely sealed her in profound energy from head to toe. It looked like Yun-Chi had suppressed Shui Meiyin with profound energy easily, but in reality, he was letting out a long sigh of relief in his head. The abrupt change caught everyone off guard. Loud exclamations kept bursting from the spectator stands. "What?" Shui Yangyu shot to her feet immediately. Disbelief was clearly etched on her face. The two of them had fought soul to soul, and Yun-Chi was the one who won the battle. Yun-Chi and Shui Meiyin's soul battle had lasted quite a long time, but no one had tried to check what was going on inside with their soul energy. It was because a forceful soul probe was bound to cause interference to both parties' souls, and since this was the conferred god battle, such an action was absolutely not allowed. Since no one could see what was going on inside the soul world, no one knew what kind of terrible battle Yun-Chi and Shui Meiyin had gone through. They only knew that Yun-Chi had unleashed both the Golden Crow Divine Soul and Ice Phoenix Divine Soul at the same time, although they sensed nothing from Shui Meiyin because her soul energy was absolutely untraceable. Yun-Chi had Shui Meiyin completely under his profound energy's control. Anyone could see that he could take her life easily if he exerted even a bit of force. The battle was decided. Yun-Chi said unhurriedly, "You've lost." "Now, sir, Yun-Chi's voice trailed off unnaturally. Even his eyes had become frozen for a second. Shui Meiyin was sitting absent-mindedly on the floor and staring at him with misty eyes. A bright pink color had crawled all the way from her perfect countenance down to her neck. Somehow, the blend of color and expression granted her a seductive, irresistible quality that could thrum the heartstrings and blood of every man. It was a charm that absolutely shouldn't belong to someone her age. Gradually, Shui Meiyin's eyes turned red and watery. Yun-Chi's face was as thick as a city wall, but even he couldn't help but avert his gaze and speak weakly. "Cough, as you know there's a saying called all fair's in war, so that just now was a common tactic. Please don't get mad, okay?" Yun-Chi lowered his voice to the point where only Shui Meiyin could hear him, and every word he said was suffused with guilt. It was to the point where he began withdrawing his profound energy from Shui Meiyin without realizing it. Not only was it no common tactic, it was absolutely despicable and extremely shameless, especially because his opponent was only half an adult. Yun-Chi hadn't just blasphemed her soul in the soul space, he had practically raped her right before her own eyes. Shui Meiyin bit her lips as water threatened to drown her eyes completely. Finally, they condensed into two translucent tear droplets. "I'll never forgive you." Shui Meiyin suddenly turned around after the cry and struggled free from Yun-Chi's profound energy suppression. As she got up and flew into the air, the two-tear droplets finally broke free from her eyes and landed soundlessly on the conferred god stage and Yun-Chi's heart and soul. "Yun-Chi." Shui Meiyin flew out of the conferred god stage in the blink of an eye, but she didn't slow down, return to the glazed light realms seating or even greet her father and sister. She just flew far away into the distance. "Meiyin." The glazed light realm king stood up with clear worry on his face. Beside him, Shui Yangyu's had already taken off in a blue light and chased after Shui Meiyin. Before she left, Yun-Chi could clearly sense her steely gaze drilling into his body. It was immediately followed by everyone else in the glazed light realm's seating area, including the glazed light realm king himself. He could sense puzzlement, hostility, and anger from their eyes. Earlier, he hadn't had a moment to think about the consequences because he was pushed to the brink by Shui Meiyin. It was only now that he finally realized the severity of the problem at hand. Shui Meiyin was no ordinary person. She was the beloved daughter of the glazed light realm king, an unprecedented genius in the entire history of the Eastern Divine Region, and an unparalleled proud daughter of the heavens that the eternal heaven realm king himself had tried to recruit as a disciple, then was rejected by. It showed just how precious Shui Meiyin was to the glazed light realm. If they ever learned how exactly he had beaten Shui Meiyin, the entire glazed light realm would eat him alive. Forget the glazed light realm king himself would eat him alive. Yunqi became drenched in cold sweat the moment he thought of this. She probably wouldn't tell anyone else about it, would she? Yunqi prayed hard in his head. If she told the truth, he had already offended the Holy Eve's realm earlier in order to vent his frustrations. If he had to deal with the glazed light realm too, then he might as well run away from the Eastern Divine Region this second. Even Honorable Kui was stunned for a very long time before he finally returned back to Earth. He hurriedly declared, Shui Meiyin has gone out of bounds. Her climb to the top of the conferred god battle stops here. Yunqi wins. He'll be fighting in the 7th battle of the losers group 3 days from now. Both of today's battles had ended really quickly. The end result of Meng Duangxi and Jun Zilei's battle surprised no one, but Yunqi and Shui Meiyin's battle was definitely a shocker. Shui Meiyin's abnormal reactions also made them certain that something strange had happened while they were doing battle in the soul world. Enduring the cold, murderous gaze of the glazed light realm's crowd, Yunqi walked down the conferred god stage and returned to his seat. The moment he sat down, Mu Bingyun asked, "What happened?" Yunqi put on a straight face and said, "It's nothing. Shui Meiyin's soul energy is shockingly powerful, and I was nearly defeated by her. However, thanks to her inexperience, I was barely able to beat her using a little trick. I think she got angry because of it." Mu Bingyun knew Yunqi well enough to know that he was a man who hid his emotions well. However, his voice obviously lacked strength when he told her his answer. Whatever he did, it obviously wasn't just a little trick. She was about to probe deeper when Hu Poyun's barely controlled shout came from afar. "Brother Yun, you're just too amazing. Top 4. You're now one of the conferred god children, a new member of the 4 god children of the Eastern Divine Region." After Yunqi had defeated Shui Meiyin, the 4 god children of the conferred god battle were born. They were Luo Changsheng and Shui Yangyu from the winner group, and Jun Zilei and Yunqi from the loser group. Luo Changsheng, Shui Yangyu, and Jun Zilei were god children of the Eastern Divine Region from the start. However, Yunqi had joined their ranks by replacing Lu Lengquan. Since he had joined them by defeating one of their members on the conferred god stage, where countless profound practitioners of the Eastern Divine Region had borne witness, his new status was acknowledged and solidified faster than expected. Yunqi hailed from a middle star realm, and his profound energy was only at the 8th level of the Divine Tribulation realm. Technically speaking, the gap between his power and the 3 god children's power was like heaven and earth. However, Yunqi had undoubtedly created miracle after miracle on the conferred god stage again and again, turning everyone's common sense upside down and defeating opponents that should have been impossible for him to defeat. At this point, no one could question his right. On the contrary, the moment he was officially recognized as a member of the 4 god children, he was cheered by everyone from the stands and even those watching through the star tablets. The shouts among those of lower star realms and middle star realms were especially loud. This was the first time someone from a middle star realm had trod on the heads of countless upper star realm cultivators and become one of the absolute best of the best. The shock and sensation Yunqi stirred on the conferred god stage far exceeded any one of the 3 god children. The cheers from the Snow Song realm and Flame God realm were so great that even the blue sky was shaking slightly in response. According to the voice of Eternal Heaven, supreme glory wasn't the only thing Yunqi would get for becoming a conferred god child. The 4 great king realms would give each of them a special reward as well. However, no one knew what this special reward would be just yet. There were no additional ranking battles. The Eternal Heaven realm would be the judge of that. For example, Eternal Heaven realm would decide between Shui Meiyin and Meng Duangxi, who was 5th or 6th place according to their overall strength and performance. The same went for Lu Lengquan, Hu Poyun, and the others as well. The next few battles to come were still displayed on the screen even though everyone already knew about them. Conferred God Group Final Match, tomorrow. Holy Eve's Realm, Luo Changsheng, 10th level of the Divine Spirit Realm, versus Glazed Light Realm Shui Yangyu, 10th level of the Divine Spirit Realm. Loser Group 7th battle 3 days later. Jasper Heart Sword Pavilion Jun Zile, 10th level of the Divine Spirit Realm, versus Snow Song Realm Yun Qi, 8th level of the Divine Tribulation Realm. Both battles had yet begun, but they had already imprinted themselves deep into everyone's hearts. Luo Changsheng was certain to beat Shui Yangyu because Jun Zile was no match for Luo Changsheng, and Shui Yangyu was about as strong as Jun Zile. Naturally, it would be almost impossible for her to beat Luo Changsheng. As for the battle between Jun Zile and Yun Qi, it was true that Yun Qi had shown them many miracles and pleasant surprises again and again, but he had also exposed his absolute limit during his battle against Lu Lengquan. Although he ultimately managed to beat Lu Lengquan, it was a hard-won victory. But Jun Zile was far stronger than Lu Lengquan. That was why no one actually thought that he could beat Jun Zile even though there were countless people who were cheering for him. Naturally, the final battle of the losers group should be between Jun Zile and Shui Yangyu. Yun Qi's gaze shifted to a corner. Over there, he saw the master-disciple pair of Jun Wuming and Jun Zile were flying far away into the distance. Jun Zile had not even bothered to glance at him. "Let's go," Mu Bingyun said. Yun Qi, however, shook his head in response. He stood up and said to Hugh Poyun, "Brother Poyun, there's something I want to talk about with you alone." Hugh Poyun was taken aback. He didn't say anything and simply gave him a light nod. Yun Qi and Hugh Poyun flew away from the place, and as soon as they left the conferred God stage area, Yun Qi immediately said to him, "Brother Poyun, you have always been treated as the future hope of the Flame God realm from the very beginning, and the people of Golden Crow sect in particular have extremely high expectations for you and highly praise you. But due to the battle yesterday, the glory that you deserved ended up belonging to me. They have become crazy for me, and this craze of theirs far surpass what they feel for you. You must find it very difficult to accept, right?" Hugh Poyun's body clearly became stiff for a moment. Seeing Yun Qi speaking so bluntly, he could only blankly stare at him without being able to say anything. Yun Qi turned to look straight at him as he said in an incomparably serious manner, "Yesterday, I thought that winning against Lu Lengquan with the Golden Crow Flame would make you regain confidence in it. However, I overlooked a critical point. Doing so would hurt you far more than comfort you. Although it was unintentional, the result is still, I must apologize to you." "No, no, no." Hugh Poyun promptly waved his hand. He wanted to force a smile, but still failed to do so as he said in a dejected tone, "You haven't done anything wrong. Rather, you made the Golden Crow Flame appear so dazzling for the first time. It is me who should be apologizing. Not only did I fail to live up to expectations, but I also felt unnecessary jealousy towards Brother Yun." Having finished his words, Hugh Poyun lowered his head. "Jealousy?" Yun Qi said with an indistinct smile. "Brother Poyun, do you truly believe that my Golden Crow Flame is stronger than yours?" "Of course," Hugh Poyun said in a low voice. "Your Golden Crow Flame can even defeat Lu Lengquan. It's much stronger than mine." "No," Yun Qi slightly shook his head. "I'm quite confident if we're talking about other things, but when it comes to the Golden Crow Flame, I am absolutely far, far inferior to you." Hugh Poyun was startled upon hearing Yun Qi speak in an extremely certain tone. "Brother Poyun, the Golden Crow bloodline and the Golden Crow divine soul you possess are a complete inheritance that was given to you by Golden Crow sect's Golden Crow soul at the cost of its existence, right?" Hugh Poyun suddenly raised his head. He had a baffled expression as he looked at Yun Qi. Yun Qi faintly smiled. "No need to be surprised. Brother Poyun, you must have doubts about me having the Golden Crow bloodline and the Golden Crow divine soul. Let me give you a straightforward answer. The world where I was born is only a little planet, but there was a Golden Crow inheritance left behind on it." "So it really is the case," Hugh Poyun uttered in a low voice in a daze. The Golden Crow's souls were both soul fragments of the divine beast Golden Crow and could mentally communicate with each other. Therefore, I knew that the God realm also had a Golden Crow's soul even before my arrival in this place. In other words, the Golden Crow's soul in your Flame God realm had not ceased to exist before I came to the God realm. However, the Flame God realm no longer had the Golden Crow's soul when I arrived at the God realm. Then I saw you, who had such an extremely strong Golden Crow bloodline, as well as an abnormally great control over the Golden Crow flame. That's why when we met for the first time in the Snow Song realm, I had already guessed this point. Of course, there was also another reason. He had the precedent of Feng Zuer to go by. You, Huo Poyun was stupefied and couldn't say anything for a while. The Golden Crow bloodline and the Golden Crow divine spirit I have are from the Golden Crow's soul in my world. I think that the Golden Crow's soul in your flame god realm should have mentioned about the existence of the other soul to you all. As part of inheritance, I obtained a strand of its divine soul and a total of 9 drops of the Golden Crow's origin blood. 9 drops! Huo Poyun lightly repeated the words as his eyes were filled with disbelief. 9 drops of the Golden Crow's blood, and of the origin blood too. It was such a great divine bestowal that the disciples of the Golden Crow sect would not even dare to dream of it. But seeing the terrifying burning power of Yun Chi's Golden Crow flame, how could he only have 9 drops of Golden Crow's divine blood? That's right, only 9 drops. With respect to both the divine blood and divine soul, I am much weaker than you. Yun Chi looked Huo Poyun in the eye. The might of my burning Golden Crow flame seems so great because I have another special profound art which helps me to control the Golden Crow flame in a much better way, consequently, optimizing the might of the flame. In other words, given the level of energy I possess right now, I can only unleash the power of 9 drops of the Golden Crow's divine blood, and it is impossible for the flame to become any stronger. On the other hand, although your control over the Golden Crow flame is far better than others, you are still too young after all. You have a long way to go before you succeed in digging out the true divine might of the Golden Crow flame. In short, the burning power of my Golden Crow flame has already reached the limit, and you, with the strongest Golden Crow bloodline and the strongest Golden Crow divine soul, still have extremely enormous latent potential that anyone would find hard to imagine. Once you have gotten a hold of the true potential hidden within you, my Golden Crow flame will definitely be incomparable to yours at the same energy level. It might even become so strong that it will be impossible to mention them in the same breath. Huo Poyun. Therefore, you don't need to be concerned about it at all. As for you feeling jealous, that is even more unnecessary. It should actually be me being jealous of you. If I had a powerful bloodline like you, why would I need to fight so desperately against Lu Lengchuan? I could have burned him to ashes in no time. Hearing Yun Chi's words, Huo Poyun's bleak eyes brightened a bit. He let out a long sigh to relax himself before finally saying, while smiling faintly, "Brother Yun, I thank you for comforting me once again." "I'm not comforting you," Yun Chi said with a smile. "It's just that you were subconsciously ignoring the facts. However, although my Golden Crow flame is bound to be inferior to yours in the future, that doesn't mean that my strength will be weaker than you. Brother Poyun, how about we make an arrangement?" "What arrangement?" "You will be sent inside the eternal Heaven-Divine realm to cultivate for 3,000 years once the conferred God battle ends. So, how about we have a proper contest between us when you come out of the eternal Heaven-Divine realm?" 3,000 years was quite a long period of time for people of young generation. An extremely huge number of unforeseen factors could influence them during this time. Not only would their strength undergo transformation, their understanding of things, state of mind, objective of pursuit, and even their natures would change. His words caused Huo Poyun's eyes to brighten. These past few days, he had constantly felt as if a mass of blazing flame was burning within his heart. He heavily nodded as he looked at Yun Chi. "Brother Yun, I thank you for your words of guidance. I am the successor of the Golden Crow, Divine Spirit. Even if I'm too inexperienced right now, I and my Golden Crow flame will absolutely be not weaker than any person in the future. Brother Yun, I may be far, far inferior to you at the moment, but in 3 years I will certainly make you master and the entire Eastern Divine region see me in a new light." "Good." Yun Chi nodded as he brought his brows together. "I'll be waiting for that day. I'm also going to give my all so as to not be surpassed by you. Therefore, don't you slack for even a day during these 3,000 years. Huo Poyun reached out with his hand and heavily shook hands with Yun Chi. He had a faint smile on his face, as if clouds had been pushed aside and fog had dispersed from it. Afterwards, he turned around and flew far away into the distance. Phew, seeing the departing figure of Huo Poyun, Yun Chi sighed and relaxed inwardly before speaking to himself. "Brother Poyun, best of luck." Huo Poyun didn't notice that when Yun Chi had mentioned about cultivating for 3,000 years inside the eternal Heaven-Divine realm, he said you, not we. In the god realm, Huo was the only person that Yun Qi considered a true friend. It was not only due to his nature, there was also another reason for that. He was the last successor of the Golden Crow divine spirit. When he was in the illusory demon realm, he was not only bestowed the divine blood and divine soul of the Golden Crow's soul, he also received a lot of guidance from it. When he was full of despair on the verge of death after being poisoned by Moonflower, it was the Golden Crow's soul that guided Feng Zuer on how to save his life with the flame of nirvana. When the devil origin orb in his possession exploded in succession, it was once again the Golden Crow's soul that forcibly helped him keep his life every time the explosion happened at the cost of reducing its existential energy repeatedly. In the end, the Golden Crow's soul bestowed the last of its energy to the little demon empress and then completely vanished. Yun Qi didn't even get the chance to repay all the favors it had done. That was why he was not only friendly to Huo, but possessed very special feelings for him. He had always subconsciously wanted to repay the favors the Golden Crow's soul had done for him to Huo. Huo had constantly been suffering mental setbacks for these past 2 days, and Huo also didn't have the mood to see him in such a state. It was actually Yun Qi who racked his brains to resolve the issue for him. Compared to the matter of Huo, the true big issue was the thing he was going to face soon. 3 days later, Jun Zile, Lu Lengquan had confessed with certainty in his voice that there was absolutely an insurmountable difference between his and Jun Zile's strengths. The only thing he could rely on right now were the 7-time wheel pearls. But was it really possible for him to greatly lessen such an enormous difference in strength in the short period of 7 months? When he returned to the courtyard, Mu Bingyun was quietly waiting for him. Her first words were, "How are you planning to deal with Jun Zile?" "No idea." Yun Qi shook his head. "I have 7-time wheel pearls in my possession. If I can achieve a great breakthrough in these 7 months, I might be able to put up a fight against her, probably." The entire Eastern Divine region was in an uproar to see someone from a Middle Star realm making it into the ranks of the 4 conferred god children, but there was not the slightest sign of joy or excitement on Mu Bingyun's face. She had an extremely deep and serious look instead. She let out a light sigh. "It seems that it is still not enough for you even after reaching such heights. You're determined to win the battle against Jun Zile, right?" "Yes, I am," Yun Qi said in a resolute and decisive tone of voice. There were still 3 days before the battle, so Yun Qi didn't immediately activate the time wheel barrier to cultivate. Rather, he sat by the pond once again as he closed his eyes and concentrated his mind to think hard. The period of 7 months might seem quite nice to increase his profound strength, but he was very clear about the reality in his heart. It was impossible for him to catch up with Jun Zile in just 7 months, given the huge difference in their strengths. He had to think of some other method. Was there any way that could increase his strength by a great margin in such a short time? Was there any way that could greatly amplify the might of the heaven-smiting sword? Time quickly passed by as he pondered over it. Unbeknownst to him, the sky had already started to get dark. When the curtain of night was about to enshroud the world, Yun Qi suddenly raised his head as an unusual firelight flashed in his eyes for an instant. It was at this time that an angrily rebuking voice came from the outside. "Yun Qi, get the hell over here!" Right after, a blue light beam shot down from the sky and immediately blew the large gate of the courtyard to pieces. At this time, there was no doubt that all the people from the Snow Song realm were alarmed. Mu Bingyun, Mu Huanji, and the others instantly came out to face the attacker, but they were dumbfounded when they saw a woman entering their residence with a sword in her hand. The woman was dressed in blue, she had a fairy-like beauty, and fantastically colorful light was emitting from the sword in her hand. It was actually Shui Yingyu. As the eldest daughter of the glazed Light Realm King and one of the 4 god children of the Eastern region, Shui Yingyu had long been famous throughout the Eastern Divine region. Most believed that she had the same nature as her name, calm and gentle like water, noble and quietly elegant like a moon. She had almost never shown visible changes in her emotions. But in this moment, Shui Yingyu had a chilly look in her eyes, and her snow-white face was full of anger. Not only did she have her jade rivulet sword unsheathed, there was also faint killing intent emitting from it. Yun Qi stood up with a thud as his scalp went numb. "It's over. She found out what I did. I'm so seeking dead." "Fairy Yingyu, what are you trying to say?" Mu Huanji asked carefully. Although Shui Yingyu was technically a junior, she was also the glazed Light Realm King's daughter and one of the 4 god children of Eastern Divine region. In the god realm alone, her fame and status far exceeded a mere great elder of the snow song realm already. Shui Yingyu was normally mild-tempered, and she had to consider her reputation before taking any actions. It didn't take a genius to figure out that something big must have happened for her to block Yun Qi's path right here, in Eternal Heaven realm, in fury. Shui Yingyu ignored Mu Huanji completely and locked her gaze on Yun Qi, the jade rivulet sword pointing straight at his glabella. She asked angrily, "Speak, what did you do to my sister Yun Qi?" From the elders to the disciples, every Snow Song Realm member had come out of their places to stand with Yun Qi. At the same time, they turned to stare at Yun Qi in confusion. However, Yun Qi actually calmed down upon hearing Shui Yingyu's outburst. Shui Yingyu's question was, "What did you do to my sister?" This meant that she actually had no idea what he did to Shui Meiyin. One had to remember how thick the skin on Yun Qi's face was. First, he replaced the look of surprise on his face with puzzlement. Then, instead of stepping backwards in fright, he actually took 2 steps forwards and met Shui Yingyu's threats politely, asking, "Fairy Yingyu, I don't quite understand what you mean. I don't know your sister, and she's the one who initiated conversation the few times we've spoken with each other. In fact, the only time we've ever come into contact with each other is today's conferred god battle. Did something happen to your sister? I honestly have no idea whatsoever. Is there a misunderstanding going on between us? Fairy Yingyu, Yun Qi, and Princess Meiyin have never come in touch with each other in private. Can we please hear the reason behind your anger?" Mu Bingyun said while stepping forward. Although she wasn't shrouded in any frost energy, in reality a wisp of energy stood between Shui Yingyu and Yun Qi. If Shui Yingyu really did lose her mind and attack Yun Qi, she would be able to stop it immediately. Shui Yingyu's aggression instantly weakened by several degrees when Yun Qi's honest, sincere, and even innocent-looking eyes met hers, but still she continued in a forceful manner. "Misunderstanding. How dare you claim that it was a misunderstanding at this point? Meiyin left on her own, shut herself in her room, and has refused to see anyone after battling against you. She hasn't even spoken a word until now. What on earth did you do to her?" "I see." Yun Qi looked even more puzzled. "Maybe your sister has suffered some mental injuries because she lost." "Nonsense." Shui Yingyu's eyebrows furrowed. Meiyin participated in the profound God convention as a way to entertain herself. She doesn't care about winning at all, so there's no way she would let herself get wounded like this. She had progressed all the way to top 6, while treating the conferred God battle as a game. Every Snow Song Realm disciple who heard this dripped with sweat. Yun Qi frowned slightly before a look of understanding passed across his face. Then he said calmly, "Your sister possesses the strongest mental energy I've ever seen. To be honest, it is pure luck that I managed to beat her at all. Our mental battle was intense to say the least, so it's only natural that some mental damage has lingered after the battle. Perhaps this is why your sister's mental state is off right now." "That's right," Mu Bingyun nodded slightly. "A mental battle is different from a profound energy battle. In the beginning, Princess Meiyin clearly had the upper hand. However, the tides were suddenly overturned in the end. When one side loses a fierce mental battle, they'll almost certainly suffer a massive amount of mental rebound. It seems clear to me that Princess Meiyin's abnormal reaction is due to the mental damage she suffered during the battle. If that is the case, then it is a normal reaction. Besides that, Yun Qi and Princess Meiyin's battle was fair and witnessed by all. They never engaged in any verbal sparring or physical contact, so I believe that your worries are unfounded." Yun Qi. Mu Bingyun's explanation caused Shui Yingyu's eyes to change in a flash. Slowly, she lowered the jade rivulet sword and withdrew her anger. "Perhaps I have allowed my impulses to get to me." Shui Yingyu's tone turned amiable. "Yun Qi, I'll trust you for now." She then turned toward Mu Bingyun and bowed deeply. "Please forgive Yingyu for her rudeness. When my sister is recovered, and I've ascertained that it has nothing to do with Yun Qi, Yingyu will personally pay you a visit and apologize for my transgressions." In the beginning, Shui Yingyu had obviously allowed her worry and anger to get to her. However, she had also acted courteously and gracefully after she was able to calm down. Mu Bingyun said, "You love your sister deeply, Fairy Yingyu. It's only natural for you to feel this way, and we are deeply impressed by your love. You don't need to visit us and apologize at all." Shui Yingyu nodded slightly, and the jade rivulet sword vanished from her hand. She was just about to turn around and leave when a melodious voice suddenly rang from afar. "Sister." Yun Qi's secret sigh of relief had just exited his nose when the sudden voice caused it to be sucked right back down his throat. Holy shit, I'm F-seeking dead this time. The girl's incredibly melodious voice was an echo beside everyone's ears that refused to fade. A moment later, a delicate girl fell down from the night sky and landed right next to Shui Yingyu. Shui Meiyin brought about a delightful and spiritual aura. It dissipated everyone's nervousness before they realized it. Meiyin, why have you come here? Shui Yingyu was surprised by her sister's sudden appearance, but when she noticed that Meiyin was all smiles once more, in fact, for some reason she looked even happier than before, she quickly relaxed on the inside. Yun Qi soundlessly took half a step backwards. It was all your fault, sister. The tip of Shui Meiyin's nose lifted a little. Just now, Brother 99 told me that you stepped away angrily in order to interrogate Big Brother Yun Qi, so I had no choice but to rush over. You didn't get angry with Big Brother Yun Qi and hurt him, did you? No, I haven't. Shui Yingyu was a little caught off guard. Yun Qi, phew, thank goodness. Shui Meiyin patted her small chest once as if she was sighing in relief. Then, she looked at Mu Bingyun and the Snow Song Realm members and bowed politely. Hello, everyone, senior, brother, and sister from the Snow Song Realm. My sister must have offended you all, hasn't she? Please don't blame her for my mistakes. It's all my fault. Shui Meiyin's voice was sweet, gentle, and sincere. It was like a sweet stream of spring water passing through everyone's hearts. Shui Meiyin was like a gift from heaven. No one had the heart to reprimand her even if she did do something terrible, much less an insignificant matter like this one. That was why Mu Huanji quickly waved his hand smilingly. It's okay, it's okay. It's just a very minor misunderstanding. On the contrary, we are honored to be visited by the two beauties of glazed light, even though we are your seniors. Mu Tanjai echoed his sentiment. The two great elders of the Snow Song Realm were already like this, much less the disciples of the Snow Song Realm. They were so excited, so in awe, by the closeness and presence of the famed goddesses that they nearly couldn't speak. They didn't even dare take half a step forward because they were afraid that it would be blasphemy. Yun Qi was wearing a dumb look on his face. What's going on? Something doesn't feel right about this. So your abnormal reaction from earlier had nothing to do with Yun Qi after all? Shui Yingyu asked in a much gentler tone. She was even staring at Mu Huanji and the others guiltily and apologetically. Of course he's related to it. However, Shui Meiyin's expression suddenly turned serious and her tone turned heavy. It's all because he did those bad things to me? HMPH. Yun Qi was already feeling scared and guilty when Shui Meiyin showed up. Now his heart practically skipped a beat. What goes up must come down. He screwed the girl and now he had to pay for his sins. Shui Meiyin's words caused everyone's face to change instantly. In this scenario, bad things was about as bad it could be. Shui Yingyu's anger had just gone down a moment ago, but now it was sparked into wildfire once more, one that was far bigger and deadlier than the original. Her star-like eyes turned completely cold as she approached Yun Qi threateningly. Yun Qi, how dare you feign innocence? Speak. What on earth did you do to my sister? Ah. Before Yun Qi could say anything, Shui Meiyin suddenly let out a cry and stood between Shui Yingyu and him in haste. She even opened her arms wide as if to protect him. Sis, why are you acting so fierce all of a sudden? You'll scare big brother Yun Qi like this. Yun Qi? Shui Yingyu was caught off guard for a second. She replied while frowning, but didn't you say he did some bad things to you? I can't possibly forgive him for that. Shui Meiyin's voice turned soft as she bowed her perfect face slightly. A blush suddenly bloomed across her cheeks. Shui Yingyu was so shocked by the change that she almost thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. Then Shui Meiyin looked up and stared straight into Shui Yingyu's eyes. The blush hadn't faded, but her eyes were sparkling like stars. It's true. I was pretty angry and sad at the time, but after I spent a day thinking about it seriously, I finally figured something out. After that, I wasn't angry at all. I was even a little happy. Yun Qi? Shui Yingyu's eyebrows furrowed in deep puzzlement. Meiyin, what on earth are you talking about? What's going on? I want. The young girl bit her lips as she struggled for a moment. Then her eyes grew firm as she turned around, pointed a finger at Yun Qi and declared loudly, I want to marry big brother Yun Qi. SSSD. Yun Qi's body turned weak and he slipped on his feet. He nearly fell head first into the pond next to him. WWW? What? It was as if the earth had shattered alongside Shui Meiyin's declaration. If everyone from the Snow Song Realm looked dumbstruck, then Shui Yingyu looked like she was struck by thunder. She froze on her feet for a very long time before she finally said in disbelief, "What? What did you say just now?" Shui Meiyin actually looked a lot more comfortable after she had spoken her wish the first time. She jumped 2 steps backwards and stood prettily next to Yun Qi. Then, her features curled slightly into a smile. "I said I want to marry Big Brother Yun Qi, hey. Yun Qi, Macron, Japanese letter." Oh, at number %, the world instantly turned as silent as death. Nearly everyone was wondering if their eyes had gone haywire. Mu Huanji and Mu Tanjai in particular wore expressions that looked like they had just suffered strokes. They couldn't even spit a word out of their throats until much later. It was a feat that brought honor to one's ancestors for a middle star realm denizen to marry an upper star realm denizen. But Shui Meiyin was the daughter of the glazed light realm king and the #1 proud daughter of heaven in the entire eastern divine region. Yun Qi might have made himself famous, but the status gap between him and Shui Meiyin was still like the status gap between a loach and a phoenix. If Shui Meiyin were to marry Yun Qi, well, if a phoenix were to marry a loach, it would definitely be something that shocked the world, and one on a big scale too. What nonsense are you spouting? Shui Yingyu's brain was demolished right now, and her anxiety only burned stronger when she saw the clear determination in Shui Meiyin's expression. "I'm not spouting nonsense. I mean every word I said." Shui Meiyin only looked more and more determined. She took another step closer to Yun Qi, to the point where it looked like they were glued together. "He's the one I want to marry." She turned sideways and looked at a stupefied Yun Qi. She said a little embarrassedly, "Big brother Yun Qi, you did those bad things to me, so you're the only one I can marry now. You must take responsibility and be good to me, you hear?" Yun Qi, at number %. Not only did Shui Meiyin not withdraw her antics, she was acting more and more intimate to Yun Qi by the second. Shui Yingyu's scalp felt numb as her mind fell into disorder. "You, be quiet already. You'll come back with me right now." If Shui Meiyin's declaration were to spread, it would literally become the joke of the century. At this point, teaching Yun Qi a lesson was the last thing on her mind. The only thing she wanted to do now was to drag Shui Meiyin away from here. "I don't wanna." But Shui Meiyin rejected her immediately and pressed her head against Yun Qi's arm. She said embarrassedly, "I still have so many things I want to talk to Big Brother Yun Qi about." Yun Qi, at number %. "Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing?" Shui Yingyu, at number %. "Yingyu Meiyin, what are you two doing here?" Just when the atmosphere had taken a turn for the strangest, an amiable voice suddenly came from afar. At the same time, a vast and boundless aura descended soundlessly from above, and for a split second Yun Qi thought the blue sky was falling on their heads. This is... Mu Huanji and everyone else's faces changed drastically into shock. Shui Meiyin's eyes lit up and she cried out happily, "Daddy! Daddy, Shui Meiyin's father. The glazed light realm king?" There was a buzz and Yun Qi's head nearly exploded on the spot. First it was Shui Yingyu. Then it was Shui Meiyin. Now it was the glazed light realm king. The great realm king of one of the 3 strongest upper star realms, and the man who was inferior only to the 4 great emperors of the eastern divine region. Well, this is serious. Qianheng slowly walked inside. Everyone felt their minds being suppressed by a boundless force, despite the fact that there was no profound energy fluctuations around his body. There was a youth behind him. He was actually none other than the 99th young master of the glazed light realm, Shui Yinghen, whom Yun Qi had bumped into earlier this day and exchanged a few words with. What level of an individual was Shui Qianheng? His arrival was absolutely an incomparably huge fright to the people from the Snow Song realm. It was clearly because of Shui Meiyin that a person of his identity bothered to come at such a place. It was only Shui Meiyin who could make the glazed light realm king, who made the whole eastern divine region shake with his every step, not hesitate to step into the temporary residence of people from a middle star realm. Glazed light realm king, our Snow Song is extremely honored to have you personally visit us. But have you come here for your daughter? Mu Huanji, who had the highest seniority among the people from the Snow Song realm, stepped forward to carefully greet the other party. Shui Qianheng slightly nodded his head in response. His gaze swept around and caught sight of Shui Meiyin intimately standing beside Yun Qi, whose body had become taut in this moment, causing a frown to suddenly appear on his face. He again looked at Shui Yingyu and immediately asked, in a heavy voice with a rarely seen unpleasant expression, "What exactly happened?" Shui Yingyu suppressed her emotions. She gave a glance at Shui Meiyin before saying a scolding tone, "Meiyin, even royal father has personally come because he was worried about you. Come back with us right now." "Daddy, I'm all right." Shui Meiyin smiled beautifully. "I didn't pay attention to you all earlier because I was very seriously thinking about a matter." "Oh, that's right. Daddy, 99th brother, there is something I want to tell you. I have already decided that." "Meiyin?" Shui Yingyu was greatly alarmed, but Shui Meiyin didn't care at all about her intention to stop her from speaking any further. She continued while only thinking of herself. "I want to marry big brother Yun Qi." Bam! Shui Yinghen's body swayed all of a sudden and his head crashed into Shui Qianheng's back. Shui Qianheng was taken aback. He instantly widened his eyes a bit. "What did you say?" "Royal father," Shui Yingyu said in an urgent voice. "Meiyin is only playing around. I'm not playing around." Shui Meiyin immediately corrected her. She said with a solemn face, "I've made this decision after thinking it over very seriously." Mu Huanji drew back in fear, and the others also moved backwards carefully, not daring to exhale. Everyone knew very well that hearing such a thing would enrage Shui Qianheng to an extent that a world-shaking incident could happen at any moment. Just as they expected, Shui Qianheng's face became quite contorted upon hearing her words. His brows began to tremble. He wanted to be angry, but was still unwilling to get angry at Shui Meiyin, so he could only suppress his anger as he reprimanded Shui Meiyin. "What nonsense! Such terrible nonsense! What kind of foolish talk is that? Are you not afraid of being laughed at by others? Return with us right away." Why would people laugh at me?" Shui Meiyin tilted her head. "I found someone to marry, which is a very happy and beautiful matter. Daddy, shouldn't you be glad for me?" Yun Qi, Shui Yingyu, Shui Yinghen. "You—" It might be fine for her to say such a thing if there was no outsiders here, but the whole group from the Snow Song realm was also watching them. Even the distinguished glazed light realm king felt his face burning hot at his daughter, repeatedly talking about marrying someone from a middle star realm. What the hell was going on here? "Daddy, why do you look so angry? Don't tell me that you don't agree with my decision." Shui Meiyin slightly rotated her eyes as she asked in a pitiful and lovely tone. "Of course I disagree. You're spouting nonsense." "Nonsense? How could the glazed light realm king keep his anger suppressed any longer? His tone of voice had also become a bit heavier. "Oh," Shui Meiyin revealed a look of disappointment before immediately showing a smile. "It doesn't matter. It's my personal matter anyway, so Daddy doesn't have any say in it." "How could that be true?" Shui Qianheng asked in a heavy voice. "I don't feel like caring about your useless big brothers, but all the major matters concerning you and your elder sister must be decided by me. You speak another nonsensical word. Return with us at once." "A certain useless big brother. What's that gotta do with me?" Shui Qianheng had never shown a look of anger in front of Shui Meiyin, and that was why Shui Meiyin was stunned upon seeing his current expression. However, the resolute look in her starry eyes became increasingly stronger, and she also didn't seem to be angry in the least. "Daddy, how can you act like this? When I was small, Mother told me that it's only up to me to decide who I want to marry, and even Mother and Daddy can't interfere in this matter. Daddy, why do you have a completely different opinion than Mother? What? What does your mother even understand?" When Shui Meiyin mentioned her mother, Shui Qianheng's tone clearly grew a bit weaker. "Mother also said that to marry someone is one of the biggest matters in the lives of us girls. Neither we nor anyone else should forcibly make decisions about such an important matter. If there comes a day when we meet someone we adore, really want to look at every day, and also wish to be together with all the time, then we need to very courageously voice our feelings and then try our best to marry him. Only then will we be able to have a happy life." Mother also said that back then, when she was filled with feelings of adoration for Daddy, she acted very courageously and worked hard to marry Daddy. It was only because of that she was able to have me and Big Sis and live a very happy life. Don't tell me that Mother's words were wrong. Don't tell me that Daddy doesn't want me to be happy like Mother." Shui Qianheng opened his mouth, but was actually unable to utter a single word in response. His gaze shifted to her side as he immediately took his anger out on Yun Qi in a quite heavy and furious voice. "You bastard! Just what kind of decoction did you make her drink?" "Glazed Light Realm King, please calm down." Yun Qi waved his hands in a flurry. He said in an urgent voice, "Junior had soul battle with your daughter today, so it is very likely that she is behaving in such a manner due to some mental damage that was caused to your daughter because of the extreme fierceness of the battle." "Glazed Light Realm King, Yun Qi is right," Mu Bingyun said. You should have also watched that extraordinarily fierce battle of soul power between these two. Xianxia made a comeback at the last moment and emerged victorious. Her behavior is very likely that because there was some of his soul imprint left behind in her soul from the moment he defeated her. Xianxia nodded his head like a chick pecking rice grains, as he was also absolutely certain that it was the reason. Otherwise, Shui Meiyan should not have reacted in such a way, no matter what. It would only be normal for her to come over with her elder sister to beat him up. That's not it. Before the glazed Light Realm King could reply, Shui Meiyan firmly shook her head denial. She turned her head to look at Xianxia, and her eyes shone quite brightly, as if there were stars embedded in them. Yesterday, the battle between Big Brother Xianxia and Big Brother Lengchuan was really, really awesome. There were many times during the battle when I thought that Big Brother Xianxia would certainly lose, but Big Brother Xianxia would suddenly become even more awesome. Even Daddy and Grandpa Eternal Heaven were so moved while watching the battle at that time. There was only Big Brother Xianxia left in my sight, and I was no longer able to see Big Brother Lengchuan. Moreover, my heart started to beat faster and faster. Seeing his daughter looking at Xianxia dazedly and longingly, as if she was in a trance, and listening to her cotton-soft voice, the glazed Light Realm King was dumbfounded at first, then felt a strain on his scalp. Shui Yingyu also opened her lips unconsciously. It was only now that she noticed that the situation was even more severe than her expectations, and quite severe too. I was so happy all of yesterday, thinking that I would be fighting with Big Brother Xianxia today. When I saw Big Brother Xianxia today before arriving at the conferred God stage, I suddenly felt the urge to approach him. When I got to talk with him, I was feeling really happy in my heart. The feeling of satisfaction filling my heart was completely different from before. Today, I really worked hard to think over it the whole day, and I finally understood that it was definitely the feeling that Mother had talked about with me. The corner of Xianxia's mouth twitched. Escalate must be joking, right? Could it be that? His heroic bearing the previous day had truly left a deep mark in the pure heart of this girl. Or was it his overly powerful and transcendent charm that brought about this disaster? Wait a minute. No. In such a situation, wouldn't the glazed Light Realm King rip me a new one? That's enough. At this time, Shui Qianheng's heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys were all jumping about. Irritated or suffocated was far from enough to describe his condition at the moment. He even felt like it would be better to die than live any further. He, the distinguished glazed Light Realm King, who looked down on all living beings with arrogance, was always dying to keep this daughter of his in his hands. But who would have thought that she would be smitten with a boy from a middle star realm? Oh, no, from the lower realms. His daughter was widely recognized #1 heaven-favored goddess of this generation, and the eternal Heaven Realm King had personally made a visit to receive her as a disciple, but was rejected by him. But now she actually wanted to be with a boy from a middle star realm, even though it was clearly a losing deal. Meiyan, Shui Qianheng's scalp was tingling endlessly as his eyes emitted fury. Listen here. Only the most outstanding man in this world could deserve you. In Daddy's eyes, even Luo Changsheng isn't worthy of you. As for this boy, he would be unworthy of even a hair of yours, even if becomes 10,000 times stronger. You're still young right now, so there are too many things that you don't understand. When you grow up, only then will you be able to know the most suitable man for you. Shui Meiyan, however, pouted in response before voicing her disapproval. Big Brother Xianxia isn't as bad as Daddy says. In the future, he might become even more powerful than Daddy. Shui Qianheng's lungs were on the verge of blowing up. Looking at Shui Meiyan's attitude, it was evident that she was displeased with him belittling Xianxia and had even started to defend him. He couldn't bring himself to flare up at Shui Meiyan, so he targeted Xianxia to vent the feelings of suffocation and rage building within him. Xianxia, boy, I see what you did. Shui Qianheng had still not done anything, but Shui Meiyan's body flashed as she stood resolutely in front of Xianxia. Daddy, what do you want to do? Big Brother Xianxia is my future husband and your son-in-law. You can't hurt him or so much as shout loudly at him. Otherwise, I'll get angry. At %, Shui Qianheng almost spurted a mouthful of blood on the spot. Fairy Meiyan, could you listen to a few words? Xianxia finally spoke. Now that the situation had gone out of control to such an extent that even the distinguished glazed Light Realm King was about to collapse, he might truly be done for if he didn't do something. If the glazed Light Realm King were to truly make his move against him in rage, so as to permanently eliminate any chance of future trouble, even the combined strength of everyone present would not be enough to stop him. Big brother Yun-Chi, just call me Mei-yin. Shui Mei-yin turned around. Her soft and fair face was blooming with a smile, and her eyes looking at him contained the expressions of joy and intimacy as if she was looking at her husband. The glazed Light Realm King's brows moved sideways, but he didn't interrupt them. There was only a cold and harsh look in his eyes, as he clearly warned him. This all started because of you, so you're going to die if you don't fix the issue. You see, about you wanting to marry me? Possibly. The actual situation is quite a bit different from your expectations. Yun-Chi chose each of his words carefully, as he spoke as slowly and tactfully as possible. Ah, Shui Mei-yin blinked her eyes. Could it be that big brother Yun-Chi doesn't like me? No, of course, that's not the case. Yun-Chi promptly waved his hands. It was not because he was afraid of hurting Shui Mei-yin. Instead, if he dared to say that he didn't like Shui Mei-yin, Shui Qianheng would absolutely fly into a rage. Who do you think you are to not like my daughter? Of course, he absolutely couldn't say anything along the lines of him liking her either. Otherwise, Shui Qianheng would similarly fly into a rage. Who do you think you are to like my daughter? Actually, well, you should be aware that I come from a very humble origin, from a very distant, desolate, and really low-level planet. Before arriving in the God realm, I have actually already gotten married. Ah! Shui Mei-yin opened her lips, as a visible change appeared on her face. Yun-Chi continued, moreover, I have 3 wives. If you truly want to marry me, you can only, have the position of a concubine. Given your incomparably noble identity, there is no way such a thing would be all right. Therefore, it doesn't matter. Yun-Chi had never expected for Shui Mei-yin to smile at this time. Furthermore, her smiling face looked very happy. My daddy has a total of 173 wives, and my mother is one of the youngest, as well as the one who is most doted on by daddy. If I become Big Brother Yun-Chi's concubine, I'll also certainly be doted on the most by Big Brother Yun-Chi. That's so great. Yun-Chi opened his mouth wide, stupefied. Shui Qianheng could only facepalm at her words. Yun-Chi, you're obviously so powerful, and you only have 3 wives. You're so modest. Even my 99th brother already has 11 wives. You're my fiancé, so you must at least be on par with daddy. No, that's not right. You need to be even stronger than he is. After Shui Mei-yin's coquettish declaration, her beautiful eyes glittered and she glanced around. That's right. I know several very, very good big sisters. They're all daughters of realm kings and they're all really beautiful. Big brother Yun-Chi will definitely like them. Ah, that's right, they're still my sister. You still won't shut up. Shui Qianheng, a wise and sagely individual, was actually now fuming and on the verge of exploding. At first, she was spouting all sorts of nonsense about marrying Yun-Chi, and now, to add oil to the fire, she suddenly decided to initiate finding other wives for him. She even dared to offer up his other precious daughter. He wanted to give Shui Mei-yin a tongue lashing, but looking at her innocent eyes that were purer than the stars themselves, he couldn't bring himself to. He could only vent the pent-up anger in his stomach on Yun-Chi. Yun boy, you better resolve this. Resolve this, your mother? She's your own daughter, this is none of my business. He silently lashed out in his heart, but this entire mess was started by him. Yun-Chi started racking his brains and quickly pivoted in a thick-skinned manner. Princess Mei-yin, why you? Oh, that's right. You should know that I'm actually a bad guy. I'm pretty bad, my character is so corrupted, and my methods are shameless. I'm the worst of the worst, I'm a baddie through and through. This time it was Shui Yingyu and the others' turns to be tongue-tied. You said yourself that you'd never be able to forgive me, so... That's right. Shui Mei-yin giggled as she interrupted him mid-sentence. That's why you have an entire lifetime to make it up to me. Yun-Chi was rendered speechless on the spot. Furthermore, I know that big brother Yun-Chi definitely likes me a lot, if not. Shui Mei-yin's voice started to go softer as she trailed off, her face turning a bright shade of red. If not, how could you do those things to me? Yun-Chi... As expected, both of Shui Qianheng's eyes grew wide with fury. A fearsome aura started to surge around him as he bellowed. What does those things mean? Yun boy, what exactly did you do to my daughter? If you even dared touch a single hair on her H. No, never, it isn't what you think. Absolutely nothing happened. Yun-Chi quickly waved his hands. HMPH, I know that you wouldn't have the gall. Shui Qianheng snorted. He wasn't that suspicious, as within the glazed light realm, Shui Mei-yin was always within range of his spirit sense. Anyone approaching within even 10 feet of her was clearly within his perception. However, Shui Qianheng had underestimated Yun-Chi. Others might not have had the gall, but Yun-Chi? Well, Although he hadn't physically touched her, within their consciousnesses he had already had quite deeply. Yun-Chi quickly nodded. He quickly took a silent, deep breath and tried another tack. Princess Mei-yin, your royal father is right. You're still very young, you're absolutely not of marriageable age. That doesn't matter, I'll eventually grow up. Shui Mei-yin brushed him off with a laugh. Mother married daddy when she was only 16. I'll be 16 next year. But if it's next year and you're in the eternal heaven pearl, you'll be there for a very long 3,000 years, Yun-Chi matter-of-factly replied. Oh, Shui Mei-yin suddenly flinched. You're only 15 this year. At this age, you're more or less likely to be rash and impulsive. Perhaps even in as short as a few days later you might think otherwise and then regret your decision. Definitely not. Shui Mei-yin shook her head. She looked intently at Yun-Chi. In her eyes, Yun-Chi was a wondrous and colorful enigma. I've already decided I must marry you. Besides you, I won't marry anyone else. After all, her voice suddenly started to become softer once more. I've already been bullied by you, HMPH. Cough, cough, TT. Then how about we have an agreement? Yun-Chi suddenly leisurely replied, trying to downplay Shui Mei-yin's last sentence. Agreement? Yes. Yun-Chi nodded. He looked at the young girl and smiled. Once the profound God convention is over, you will enter the eternal divine realm for 3 years. And these 3 years will be dilated into 3,000 years. 3,000 years can change a lot of things, especially one's thinking. You're suddenly saying you want to marry me now, regardless of your father, sister, brother, and even me telling you that you're making an impulsive decision. You're behaving like a little child who thinks she has suddenly discovered a wondrous idea. Yet this wondrous idea is but a fleeting thought. It came quickly, but it can go quickly as well. However, if you come out of the eternal heaven-divine realm and you still insist on marrying me, Yun-Chi slowly straightened his back and gently continued, then even if your royal father and everyone else is against it, I will still definitely marry you. How about that? Shui Mei-yin was startled, both her eyes growing wide. She stayed silent for a long period of time, and everyone else did so as well. Deal. She suddenly started to nod her head. She stretched out her hand and brought her soft and white pinky in front of Yun-Chi. I'll listen to you, but you said all of this on your own accord. You can't go back on your word. At this moment, Shui Mei-yin's dreamlike gaze and voice firmly impacted Yun-Chi's soul. He subconsciously lifted his hand and made a pinky promise with Shui Mei-yin. All right, this is our agreement. I will definitely abide by it. Shui Mei-yin started to calm down. All of her willfulness and obstinacy started to dissipate. Yun-Chi breathed a long sigh of relief. She was only 15 now. With the coming 3 years, she would experience a long 3,000 years in the eternal heaven divine realm. Let alone 3,000 years, even 300 years, or 30, or even 3, her childish thoughts would eventually dissipate like smoke. When she walked out of the eternal heaven divine realm, she would probably not even remember this agreement. Perhaps she would even forget he ever existed. Even if she did, with her standing at the very peak of all realms, she would turn her nose up at him. Shui Qianheng and Shui Yingyu also heaved sighs of relief. Only now could Yun-Chi finally relax. He suddenly felt a sense of loss. An unbearable feeling of emptiness started to descend upon him. This feeling suddenly shocked him, and it took him several breaths of time to come to his senses. Good, Shui Qianheng said, his voice returning to its normal tone. Mei-yin, if you come out of the eternal heaven divine realm and you still want to marry this brat, I will definitely not object. This should settle it. After speaking, he actually gave Yun-Chi a look of approval. His anger had been somewhat quenched thanks to Yun-Chi's quick thinking. Daddy, you had better keep your promise, Shui Mei-yin immediately shouted. Shui Qianheng opened his eyes wide and patted his chest before speaking in a firm and resolute manner. Your daddy here is the realm king of the glazed light realm. I will never go back on my word. But before the agreed time period, you are not allowed to come into contact with this brat, or else you will be the joke of the realms. Now hurry up and return with me. This time around, Shui Mei-yin did not resist. She looked at Yun-Chi and smiled sweetly. Big brother Yun-Chi, I will now return with daddy. With regards to our agreement just now, you must never ever forget it. All right, Yun-Chi replied somewhat dispiritedly. Shui Mei-yin followed Shui Qianheng and left. When Shui Yingyu and Shui Yinghen left, they both looked at Yun-Chi with strange gazes. This entire noisy episode had finally come to an end. Phew, Yun-Chi sighed once more, his head drenched in sweat but still feeling somewhat distressed. Mu Bingyun took one last glance at him and without a word turned around and left. This is also a pretty good thing. Mu Huanji started chuckling to himself. The glazed light realm king actually has such an interesting daughter. Mu Danjai also started chuckling. Everyone all around started to break out into laughter. The disciples of the Snow Song realm looked at Yun Qi with admiration, not considering whether this was a good or bad thing, but being eyed by the greatest and most favored daughter under heaven could be said to be one's best and proudest achievement in life. Every man would envy him, glazed light realm. This is preposterous, this is preposterous. Although the situation had been diffused, Shui Qianheng's fury had yet to cease. Just thinking about how his precious daughter had fallen for a brat from a middle star realm apart from being hopelessly in love, she had even tried to find him additional wives. This was absolutely preposterous. If this wasn't the eternal heaven-divine realm, even if Yun Qi was one of the 4 conferred god children, he would have already slapped Yun Qi to death then and there. Royal father, little sister was being playful for just a moment. Don't stay angry anymore, Shui Yinghen softly said. Playful? Is this a matter you can play around with? Shui Qianheng roared. It's the fault of all of you, giving in to her in every way. Now look at what she said and done today. Good thing the eternal heaven realm has sound barriers. If this were to spread outside, wouldn't my glazed light realm become the joke of all realms? Isn't it you who gives in to her the most? Shui Yinghen muttered under his breath. Smash! Shui Qianheng slapped the table and hurriedly stood up. I've decided to place her in confinement for 3 days and have her properly reflect. Shui Yingyu replied in a fluster, Royal father, little sis. No one is to speak up for her. If we continue spoiling her, who knows what other catastrophes might happen in the future. Not only this time, from now onwards no one is to continue spoiling her. Having said that, Shui Qianheng turned around and left. Shui Yingyu and Shui Yinghen's eyes met. Shui Yinghen softly said, Looks like Royal Father is really furious this time. As both brother and sister were about to leave, Shui Qianheng's voice could suddenly be heard in the distance. Oh, Daddy's little treasure. Why aren't you resting in your room? Why have you come here? Shui Qianheng's voice didn't even have half an ounce of anger in it. In fact, it sounded extremely gentle and sugary sweet. When the duo heard him speak, they shivered and had goosebumps all over. Daddy, I'm suddenly hungry. I was thinking of eating some of Auntie Yuexian's desserts. This voice belonged to Shui Meiyin, clearly sounding like she had just woken up. Oh, good, let Daddy. Daddy will personally bring you to the drifting cloud realm. Daddy, I seem to have heard you mentioning something about confinement just now. Oh, that's right. That useless 99th brother of yours. Daddy had such high hopes for him, but he couldn't even pass the preliminaries. He has absolutely disappointed me. So I decided to place him in 3 days of confinement for him to reflect. Shui Yinghen was suddenly shell-shocked. He urgently shouted, Royal Father, I... Just as words were about to leave his mouth, Shui Qianheng's thunderous voice came roaring over. If you dare to retort, I'll add another 3 days. Hurry up and get to your reflecting. Yes. Shui Yinghen's face was full of grievance, but he didn't dare utter another half a word. Speechless, Shui Yingyu sighed. The night sky was growing darker, yet Yun Qi chose to leave the courtyard. He walked into the Flame God Realm's quarters to look for Huo Ruli. Sect Master Huo, Jr. has one more matter I need your help with. Oh, it's already so late, just what big matter is this? Huo Ruli's face was a picture of excitement. He patted his chest and said, Just ask away. Yun Qi's face looked grave. I need to make a trip to the ancient god-burying inferno prison. Waves of fire surged continuously as flames burned the air all over. It was as if this place was truly a boundless purgatory. This was a dangerous place, where ordinary people were prohibited from getting near. Then at this time, a profound light flashed as 2 human figures appeared at the side of this fire prison at the same time. Thank you, Sect Master Huo. Yun Qi sincerely thanked Huo Ruli before his gaze shifted to the vast inferno prison ahead of him. He might be able to find the means to defeat Jun Zile in this fire prison. It was basically the only thing he could think of to make it possible for him to win against her. Yun Qi walked over to the edge of the inferno prison. Just as he was about to jump down, Huo Ruli's voice came from behind all of a sudden. Wait a minute. Yun Qi turned around. Does Sect Master Huo have any instructions for me? Yun, Huo Ruli exhaled heavily as he found it difficult to relax his gaze. Back then you said that you were able to discover that there were 2 ancient horned dragons because you had reached the bottom of this inferno prison. Is that true? Amen. Yun Qi nodded his head. I also requested Sect Master Huo to keep it a secret. Hugh Ruli's expression changed as he looked at him, but he didn't say a word for a long while. Although I don't know whether I'll be able to reap any profit this time, I definitely need to return before my fight with Jun Zile. I will have to trouble Sect Master Hugh to wait for me. Having finished his words, Yun Qi jumped forward and his figure was quickly swallowed by the vast sea of fire. There was not even a trace of his aura left. Hugh Ruli didn't leave. He stood at the edge of the Inferno prison while blankly staring forward as he talked to himself absent-mindedly. This boy, how exactly did he? Yun Qi was falling straight down inside the sea of fire. The fire element in his surroundings grew increasingly violent and terrifying, but it was unable to hurt Yun Qi in the least. There was a deep frown on his face as he tried to recall that bizarre soul reaction. Back then, when Muxunian and the ancient horned dragon were in a fierce fight, and he had dived into the god-burying Inferno prison for the first time, he had sensed a soul reaction from far away at the bottom. As he had drawn closer and closer to the flame vein, the soul reaction had also become more and more distinct, as if it was calling him over while showing him the way. However, when he was getting closer, he had discovered the truth that there were two ancient horned dragons. He was so terrified that he had immediately rushed out of the god-burying Inferno prison in a panic. Afterwards, he didn't bother about that soul reaction at all, when he escaped to the distant Darkia realm. But now that he was unable to think of any way to win against Jun Zile, he had remembered about it all of a sudden, existing under the god-burying Inferno prison and causing his soul to react to it from a great distance. What could it be? Yun Qi had already had a rough guess back then. Thinking about it in this moment, he was becoming increasingly certain about his guess. A divine spirit that still existed by relying on the god-burying Inferno prison. An existence that could exist and depend on such an environment was most likely the divine spirit of the vermilion bird, phoenix, or golden crow. Since the golden crow divine spirit had died away, was it the remnant divine spirit of vermilion bird or phoenix? Although the people of the flame god realm believed that no divine spirit existed in their realm now. They thought so because no one had ever succeeded in reaching the bottom of the god-burying Inferno prison. The remnant spirit of the Ice Phoenix true god at the bottom of the heavenly Netherfrost lake was also able to somehow maintain its existence by relying on the cold vein. The flame vein of the flame god realm was undoubtedly more powerful than the cold vein of the heavenly Netherfrost lake. So it would be only normal if the remnant soul of a divine spirit was able to exist until now by relying on it. Falling straight down for over 15,000 meters into the Inferno prison, Yun Qi arrived at the bottom as fast as possible. This place was such a terrifying purgatory that no ordinary person would be able to imagine it. The fire elements in this place were so violent in nature that it would be far beyond the understanding of even someone as great as a divine master. Just a small mass of flames from this place was enough to evaporate all the oceans of an ordinary world. The spirit aura of flames rushed into his body like a storm as they transformed into his profound strength. His cultivation had only been at the divine origin realm when he had arrived at the god-burying Inferno prison for the first time. And as his cultivation had currently increased to the divine tribulation realm, the speed at which the spirit energy of the flames was gushing into him had amplified by several times. Even if he didn't do anything in this world made of extremely pure and high-level flames, his profound strength would increase at a far greater rate than others cultivating with great effort. However, it was absolutely impossible for his strength to reach the same level as Jun Zile in a short period of time. Yun Qi's gaze locked onto the extremely distant but clearly visible arc of red light. Over there was the location of the primordial flame vein. Yun Qi rushed towards the primordial flame vein at an extremely fast speed. His cultivation was much better than earlier, and as such, his speed was also much faster than the first time he had come here. The arc of red light seemed to be coming closer and closer in his field of vision, though at a very slow rate. It was at this time that Yun Qi's heart jumped all of a sudden, and his figure came to a stop too. Yun Qi subconsciously placed his palm on his chest. He felt a mysterious and vague sensation as if his soul was lightly poked by a formless thing. It was quite similar to the one from back then. This sensation, it is certainly calling me over. Yun Qi's mind shook upon discovering that his soul was still reacting the same way as the last time, and he increased his speed even more. Passing through layer after layer of the divine flames, he made his way straight to the flame vein, as his heartbeat also gradually intensified. What exactly was over there? Was it the Phoenix Divine Spirit, Vermilion Divine Spirit, or the God-burying Inferno prison spanned over 500,000 kilometers? If the arc of red light wasn't acting as his guide, it would have been extremely difficult to identify the correct direction. As Xianxia went forward, he could feel the soul reaction even more clearly. He traveled as much as 50,000 kilometers without resting for even a moment as he slowly neared his destination. Xianxia finally stopped in his tracks. Before his eyes was an arc of red light that looked like a coiling dragon in the midst of this world of flames. It meandered as far as he could see and appeared to have no end. Observing the shining arc of red light, Xianxia stared blankly at it, as a bizarre feeling of emptiness surfaced in his spirit sense. At this moment, he was suddenly unable to sense the existence of any flame element, as his perceptive power seemed to have been swallowed by an invisible hole. He constantly felt this strange and fearsome feeling for a long time, and it only slowly disappeared when his gaze shifted away from the arc of red light. There was no doubt that the primordial flame vein was in existence on the same level as the primordial cold vein of the heavenly netherfrost lake. Both of these energies were left behind from the primordial era of gods. However, the heavenly netherfrost lake only had a short cold vein, but the flame vein before his eyes seemed to be endless. Possibly the energy contained within it was too terrifying and of such an extremely high level that Xianxia could not even perceive it. Perhaps no one could think that such absolutely terrifying energy was hidden in a middle star realm such as the Flame God realm. Xianxia couldn't help but sigh with emotion. If the energy here were to be poured down, it should be enough to easily destroy an upper star realm, or maybe even a king realm, right? Xianxia slowly lifted his leg as he wanted to continue walking ahead, when two crimson flames suddenly shone from in front of him. Xianxia, you are finally here. This noble one has long awaited you. A weak and indistinct but clearly audible voice resounded in Xianxia's mind, causing him to immediately raise his head. Far above him, two long, narrow, and golden eyes opened little by little. Then light of the flames around him immediately dimmed, and the pair of eyes seemed to be the sole existence in this vast purgatory. You are the Phoenix Divine Spirit. At the same time, the golden eyes were far more long and narrow than Golden Crow Divine Spirits. Seeing this pair of eyes, Xianxia instantly thought back to the moment when he had come into contact with a divine spirit for the first time in his life 10-odd years ago. The eyes of the phoenix in the trial grounds of the Phoenix clan, in the 10,000 beast mountain range of the Blue Wind Empire. The instant this pair of eyes appeared, the divine aura of a phoenix flame also descended from above. This noble one is not a divine spirit, but a soul fragment of the phoenix that has been left behind in this world. I perceived your arrival 3 years ago, but you left before reaching here. However, you have finally arrived here as I expected. This too seems to be the guidance of fate. It really was a Phoenix Divine Spirit. After meeting the first Phoenix Divine Spirit back in the Phoenix clan, this was the second Phoenix Divine Spirit that he had come across. Moreover, it was the Phoenix Divine Spirit of the God realm. You called me over. Why did you call to me back then? Also, why do you know my name? Xianxia voiced his doubts before he thought of something. Could it be the other Phoenix Divine Spirit that told you about it? Correct, the Phoenix Divine Spirit replied in a calm voice. Although we exist in different planes, we are both remnant soul fragments of the Phoenix, and thus could communicate with each other through soul voice and memory transfer. This noble one not only knows about you, but I also know that there existed 2 soul fragments in the continent where you were born. One of them was tainted by worldly affairs and abandoned the will of the Phoenix. But it repented in the end and bestowed everything it had to a human upon perceiving the arrival of the great calamity. The other one still exists in the world, but it is also on the verge of disappearing. Other than that, this noble one is the last remaining strand of Phoenix soul in this world. However, I can only maintain my existence by relying on the God-burying Inferno prison. Once I leave this place, I will die away very quickly. Great calamity, Xianxia repeated the words. Are you by chance talking about that? Crimson Crack? He had heard some information related to the Crimson Crack from Mu Bingyun over these few days. Mu Bingyun might not have explained the matter to him in detail, but Xianxia had a general understanding of it. At the same time, the 2 words Crimson Crack had also begun to correspond to what he had heard from the Golden Crow Divine Spirit and the Ice Phoenix girl in his mind. Correct, Even though he only spoke a single word in response, the soul voice of the phoenix sounded like a sigh coming from the ancient times. What exactly is it? Could it possibly be an enormous calamity just as they have speculated? Yun-Chi hurriedly asked. No one can answer that, the phoenix's soul voice replied. Even if we are remnant soul fragments of a true god and possess the perception ability of a true god, it is still impossible to find out what is hidden behind that crimson crack, or the reason for its appearance. But there is one point that this noble one is incomparably sure of. What is behind that crimson crack is not a possible calamity, but a calamity bound to happen. Once this calamity truly breaks out, it will be far, far more fearsome than you could ever imagine. Let alone the eastern divine region, even the combined power of the entire god realm might prove to be insufficient to resist it. What? Yun-Chi's pupils shrank all of a sudden. Even the combined power of the whole god realm couldn't stop it. How could it be such a dreadful calamity? Why do you think so? It is because this noble one feels endless fear every time I perceive the aura of that crimson crack. Yun-Chi! Although it was only a soul fragment, it was still a soul of true god level after all. To make a soul of true god level feel endless fear just by perceiving it from a great distance, what kind of calamity could it be? No, there was someone who might know the answer, the Ice Phoenix girl under the heavenly Netherfrost Lake. She was the first to tell him about the future calamity, as well as also seeming to clearly know the reason behind its occurrence. She was the sole existence in the primal chaos who was truly aware of the cause and actuality of the calamity. However, she had also said that she was unable to tell him about it right now. Just what exactly was it? What was going on with that crimson crack? Although we are but soul fragments, we also have the extremely high dignity of a god. Normally, we absolutely wouldn't do anything for the sake of a human that would cost us our existence. But in the world you lived before, a phoenix fragment gave its all to a human girl. Again, in this flame god realm, the last remnant soul of Golden Crow also bestowed its entire existence to a human boy called Hugh Poyun. The sole reason for that is none other than that calamity bound to happen in the future. This noble one guided you over here for the same purpose. Yun-Chi wasn't the immature kid he used to be, and he had seen a couple of divine spirits during the past few years already. Thanks to these experiences, he felt more respect than fear when he met the Phoenix Spirit in the fiery hell. The Phoenix Spirit's words caused his heart to skip a beat. He exclaimed emotionally, "Does that mean you're going to gift me your remaining divine blood and divine soul?" The reason he returned to the God-burying Inferno prison was to find something that could improve his strength in a short time. Even if he had found nothing, he could still use the time wheel pearl and cultivate beneath the Inferno prison. Luckily for him, there was another divine spirit in the Inferno prison, and from the sound of it, the divine spirit was planning to give him its divine powers even before he made the request. You, who inherit the power of the evil god, are undoubtedly the person who can execute the Phoenix's divine power to its absolute limit. I've known of your existence since a long time ago, but I never thought that you would appear before me, so you can imagine my joy when I detected your presence 3 years ago. I'm certain you'll not disappoint the Phoenix's final will and power after inheriting them. The Phoenix Spirit's voice was grave and dignified, but it was also tinged with sincerity and the peace of having its wish granted. The power of a divine spirit was the greatest gift anyone could hope for. Not only must the person in question possess great fortune, they were normally put through many difficult trials before they were allowed to partake of its power. But in this case, the Phoenix Spirit had guided Yun-Chi to its place and voiced its desire to give him all of its power completely of its own volition. Yun-Chi himself hadn't even asked to use its power just yet. He might very well be the first person ever to receive such preferential treatment in the history of the God realm. He was also the only one who had the qualification to receive it. If only you had shown up a few years earlier, the Golden Crow Spirit would have chosen you and not Hugh Poyun. The Phoenix Spirit obviously sounded a little regretful when it said this. Naturally, Yun-Chi had no reason to turn down this offer. Feeling a mixture of pleasant surprise and excitement, Yun-Chi let out a sigh of relief before asking, "Phoenix Spirit, if the Crimson Crack calamity were to happen one day, am I strong enough to resist it with the power I currently possess?" The Phoenix Spirit fell silent for a long time before it slowly answered Yun-Chi's question. "You've inherited the evil god's power. For now, that makes you the only person who has inherited the power of the creation gods and the most special human being in the whole world. However, you are ultimately just human. Your existence and your power are no greater than a speck of dust before the overwhelming disaster that is sure to happen. Yun-Chi, that isn't a calamity anyone can fight against. If everyone in the entire God realm can set aside their racial prejudices, bias towards other star realms and individual grudges, if everyone can work together without selfish intentions and pour every ounce of power into resisting the enemy, then we may just have a sliver of a chance at surviving this. Yun-Chi, this calamity is a test for the entire God realm. The reason we've all chosen to grant all our remaining power to the humans is to leave as many seeds of hope as possible. It is also the only thing we can do. You are capable of utilizing the full extent of my power, but individual strength is naught but a speck of dust before that terrible disaster. For a while, Yun-Chi couldn't say anything. In just a few sentences, the Phoenix Spirit had given Yun-Chi a rough picture of the upcoming calamity. It was something that could very well end the entire world. If the calamity the Phoenix Spirit and the Ice Phoenix Girl mentioned were the same thing, then why did the Phoenix Spirit claim that his power was as small as a speck of dust, when the Ice Phoenix Girl claimed that he was the only one who could resolve it? What did she know? So, do you know roughly when this calamity is going to happen? Yun-Chi asked. I don't know. It isn't something anyone can predict. It may happen in a few years, a dozen years, 100 years, 1,000 years, or it may happen as soon as tomorrow. I can sense your great desire for power. Granting you the last of my powers is also the best choice I have left. However, I hope you will at least bear the burden that comes with my power and ignite a ray of hope when the calamity comes. Yun-Chi stopped asking questions. He nodded firmly and answered, I definitely need power right now. Don't worry, if that calamity is as scary as you claim, then there's no place I can escape to anyway. Very good. The Phoenix's pupils glowed strangely. My existence has become much thinned, or I wouldn't have to anchor myself to this ancient god-burying inferno prison. I shall grant you the last 7 drops of my divine blood, 70% of my divine soul, and the complete version of the world ode of the Phoenix. Yun-Chi's heart throbbed strongly. The Phoenix Spirit was so weakened that it couldn't even leave the ancient god-burying inferno prison. So he wasn't surprised at all to hear that it only had 7 drops of blood left in its possession. However, the complete version of the world ode of the Phoenix was definitely of great interest to him. Right now, he only knew 6 stages of the world ode of the Phoenix. It was completely incomparable to the complete version of the Golden Crow's record of the burning world he currently possessed. However, with the complete version of the world ode of the Phoenix, a greater amount of Phoenix Spirit divine blood and a stronger Phoenix divine soul, his Phoenix flames would finally be on par with his Golden Crow flames. The Phoenix's pupils suddenly glowed several times brighter. Then the sea of flames parted, and a fiery dot burned brightly between its pupils like a star. The pure, powerful, and divine presence of a Phoenix could be sensed from it. This is the final power the Phoenix left behind in this world. O human who inherited the power of the evil god, this noble one shall now grant to you both the Phoenix's power and its will. At the end of the Phoenix Spirit's sacred cry, the starry dot flew towards Yun-Chi and entered his forehead without resistance. 7 drops of primal Phoenix divine blood and a portion of the Phoenix's divine soul entered Yun-Chi's body. The other Phoenix divine soul inside his body immediately let out a long cry, and the 3 drops of Phoenix divine blood he had from a long time ago boiled up automatically, causing him to be covered in Phoenix flames for a very long time. Yun-Chi could clearly detect the powerful strength and the complete version of the world ode of the Phoenix that were inscribed inside the Phoenix's divine soul. However, the light in the Phoenix Spirit's pupils turned dim, and its divine presence suddenly became nearly 10 times weaker than before. The divine soul this noble one gifted you contains the complete version of the world ode of the Phoenix and the last of my powers. Unfortunately, it is so weak that it can only increase your profound energy by half a small realm. It should, however, be of some use to you. Also, you should be able to refine the divine soul and divine blood perfectly without any difficulty. The Phoenix Spirit sounded was as dignified as ever, but the weakness in its voice was unmistakable. Yun-Chi quelled the resonating reactions inside his body and bowed deeply towards the Phoenix Spirit. Thank you for your gift, Phoenix Spirit. I will not disappoint you. He knew the consequences of this gift too well. It wouldn't be long before the Phoenix Spirit disappeared entirely from this world. You don't need to thank me, the Phoenix Spirit said. It is the decision this noble one made in accordance with the Phoenix's will. You've actually fulfilled my final wish with your arrival. That being said, the phoenix spirit suddenly let out a long sigh. I suppose I am destined to betray my final promise to the Golden Crow spirit. Yuan-Chi was confused for a second before he suddenly recalled something. He blurted, "Do you mean the Golden Crow sacred sword?" The legend of the Golden Crow sacred sword has always existed in Flame God realm. It isn't strange that you'd know about it, the phoenix spirit said. Yes, the Golden Crow spirit entrusted me with the Golden Crow sacred sword just before it perished completely. A long time ago, it was a precious heritage of the Golden Crow, who survived the death of gods and devils, because it happened to be stored at the bottom of this inferno prison. In fact, that is why it has lasted to this very day. However, since there is less and less primordial energy every day, most of its power is long gone. That being the case, it is still an incredibly powerful sword in this era, and it cannot be wielded by any ordinary person. The Golden Crow spirit had no choice but to keep the weapon here because it is the only way to slow down the loss of its divine power. I was supposed to gift it to its wielder once a qualified person showed up. That human boy named Hugh Poyan is the only one in the entire world who is qualified to wield this sword. However, this noble one can no longer wait until he has fully grown into his power. I can only hope that he hasn't forgotten about the legend of the Golden Crow sacred sword, and that he'll come to the bottom of the Inferno prison and seek it out one day. The Golden Crow and Phoenix were two creatures who were incompatible with each other. But the Phoenix spirit had never forgotten the final task the Golden Crow spirit had entrusted it with just before it vanished entirely. The Phoenix spirit clearly sounded regretful and sad when it said this. Yuan-Chi didn't refine the Phoenix divine blood and divine soul immediately. Instead, he raised his eyebrows and looked thoughtful for a moment. Phoenix spirit, what are the qualifications necessary to wield the Golden Crow sacred sword? A powerful, profound strength, and a certain level of attainment in the art of the Golden Crow flames. The second requirement is especially important. What level of attainment do you mean exactly? Yuan-Chi's eyes glinted. 9 Suns Heaven's Fury. Yuan-Chi looked a little caught off guard. Which means one has to be good enough to comprehend 9 Suns Heaven's Fury. The Vermilion Bird's Thousand-Feather Nether Annihilation Song, the Phoenix's World Illuminator Red Lotus, and the Golden Crow's 9 Suns Heaven's Fury represented the absolute limit of the 3 divine flames. It is very, very difficult for a human to cultivate these techniques, and it is absolutely not something that can be done with just a high level of perception. That being said, if there's a human who has cultivated the Golden Crow's divine power well enough to execute the 9 Suns Heaven's Fury, they'll be acknowledged by the Golden Crow sacred sword. Yuan-Chi asked seriously when he heard this. In that case, may I try pulling out the Golden Crow sacred sword? The Phoenix spirit fell silent for a moment, and its aura seemed to be trembling a little. However, it didn't ask Yuan-Chi any questions. All right. The sea of flames grew turbulent, and the fiery waves parted once more. 3 kilometers away in front of him, Yuan-Chi spotted a scarlet golden light that was incredibly glaring despite its fiery surroundings. It was a huge golden sword. Half the sword was covered in reddish gold flames, while the other half was plunged into the scarlet rock, and hidden from view, Yuan-Chi's gaze was completely fixed on the sword. Try pulling it out then. Yuan-Chi passed through layers upon layers of fire before he stopped in front of the huge Golden Crow sword. As he approached, a terrifying sword aura and an equally powerful Golden Crow flame aura brushed past his face. It felt as if an active volcano that could erupt at any moment was hidden inside this sword. Although only half the sword was in clear view, its aura was still many, many times stronger than the heaven-smiting swords. Yuan-Chi took a step forwards and sucked in a deep breath. His fingers slowly tightened around the hilt of the burning sword as he gathered his profound energy. Then he gave the weapon a yank. Bang! Yuan-Chi's profound energy exploded, and golden flames burned wildly all around him. Not only did he fail to lift the Golden Crow sacred sword, but it didn't respond. He failed to cause even the slightest bit of tremor. It was as if the sword was completely frozen in place. Yuan-Chi frowned deeply, but he didn't give up. He activated Rumbling Heaven and entered his peak form straight away. At the same time, he circulated the Golden Crow's record of the burning world to its limit, causing Golden Crow flames to rise several hundred meters into the air. He gripped the hilt of the sword once more and took another deep breath. Then he shouted. Boom! A terrific explosion tore apart the flames surrounding Yuan-Chi. A giant vacuum had appeared around Yuan-Chi due to the sudden explosion of power, however. The Golden Crow sacred sword remained as still as ever. Yunqi knew that it was pointless to continue if the Golden Crow sacred sword didn't respond, even after he projected his full strength. He removed his hands from the hilt of the sword and sighed slightly. As I thought, it didn't work. He was certain that his mastery of the Golden Crow flames wasn't the problem here, so the only reason he couldn't lift the sword was because his current profound strength was too low. If he didn't grow stronger, he would never be acknowledged by the Golden Crow sacred sword, not even if he possessed the power of the evil god. What's that smell? It smells so good, so good. Just as Yunqi gave up on trying, the anxious voice of a girl suddenly rang beside his ears. At the same time, there was a red flash across his left arm, and Hunger suddenly winked into existence. Her vermilion eyes were darting everywhere urgently. Hunger! Hunger often disregarded his will and appeared on her own accord, so her appearance was nothing special. However, they were at the bottom of the ancient god burying inferno prison right now. But Hunger looked completely untouched by the fiery prison around her. She ignored Yunqi's words because she was completely absorbed in the act of sniffing with her dainty nose. It's so good, I've never smelled something so good. Where is it, eh? Hunger's gaze became fixed on the Golden Crow sacred sword. Yunqi's eyes grew wide in response. Wait a second. Is she going to? This can't be right. Wah! Hunger let out a cheer of absolute happiness and pounced towards the Golden Crow sacred sword like lightning. Reborn Hunger, wait a minute. Having come across such a food item, how was it possible for Hunger to have the time to pay attention to Yunqi? She pounced on the Golden Crow sacred sword with a whoosh, with such a speed that Yunqi was unable to react to her. Afterwards, he saw her eyes twinkling as she opened her lips, revealing a shining, sharp, white canine tooth, and moved ahead to bite at the Golden Crow sacred sword. Saliva was dripping down from her open mouth all of a sudden as it was drawn to the blade of the sword. Stop! Yunqi turned pale with fright as he dashed forth in a flurry. It was absolutely not because he was afraid of the Golden Crow sacred sword getting damaged by Hunger that he was so panicked this time. What a joke! It was none other than the Golden Crow sacred sword, a divine object left behind from the ancient era of gods. Although it was far incomparable to its true strength now, it was still an existence of the true god level. How could an ordinary profound sword be comparable to it? He was actually afraid of Hunger getting hurt by the Golden Crow sacred sword. Given the power level of the Golden Crow sacred sword, even a single bite would be enough to cause light damage to Hunger. But Hunger had already bitten the sword by the time Yunqi had let out his cry of fear. Clack! Following a loud and clear sound, a tooth-shaped hole appeared on the Golden Crow sacred sword. The piece of sword was being chewed like a golden cracker. Yunqi widened his eyes as his body froze stiff in an instant. Hunger had her cheeks puffed out as her mouth moved in a chewing motion. Her eyes shone with an excited scarlet light. Wow, so good, so yummy. SSS. The inferno prison abruptly grew very restless, and even the eyes of the phoenix in the sky shrank all of a sudden. What exactly is she? The divine voice of the phoenix was actually trembling in fear. It was because the scene before its eyes was something that even someone of its level was unable to comprehend. It was only now that Yunqi came to himself from his daze, as if he had awakened from a dream. He suddenly pounced towards Hunger as he let out a loud roar. Hunger, you can't eat that! Seeing a fierce wind blow over to her, Hunger let out a note of surprise. She broke into a run as her petite body fled away like a flittering light, causing Yunqi to completely miss his target. The Golden Crow sacred sword that hadn't moved in the slightest even after all of Yunqi's efforts was quite easily carried away by Hunger. She fled far, far away with it with great ease, as if it was only some wooden log that she had randomly picked up. At number percent, Yunqi's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. Soon after, he promptly let out a strange shout before rushing towards Hunger again. Hunger, you truly cannot eat that. Whew-ha. Watching Yunqi chasing after her to snatch her food, Hunger let out a scream and ran away from him without any hesitation while tightly hugging the Golden Crow sacred sword which was around twice the size of her body. Yunqi had a very good cultivation at the moment, and he was also under the inferno prison right now. But despite that, there was already a great distance between him and Hunger. In the blink of an eye as she fled while looking like a scarlet flittering light, even though he was moving at his top speed. She was not only carrying the Golden Crow sacred sword in her arms, she was gnawing at it as she ran wildly. Be it her running or gnawing speed, both were world-shocking and frightening enough to make ghosts and gods cry. Clacking sounds could be heard constantly all this time, as she kept on biting and chewing the sword. It also seemed as if a faint cry of fear from the Golden Crow's soul was coming from it. When he had first come across Hunger and she had forcibly eaten his dragon fault, he was not able to catch her. Later, he had again failed to stop Hunger when she had forcibly eaten the eternal night devil sword. Right now, his profound strength had reached the late stages of the divine tribulation realm, but he was still unable to catch Hunger. Before long, Yun-Chi came to a stop as he gave up on catching her. He stared fixedly at Hunger, and the Golden Crow sacred sword that was disappearing at a fast rate in her arms. In the short time of 10-odd breaths, the particularly huge Golden Crow sacred sword had been fully eaten by Hunger. When the blade of the sword completely disappeared, the Golden Crow flame that had been burning for an unknown period of long time also died out completely. There was only a dull and lusterless hilt left behind. Hunger played with the hilt as she stood in front of Yun-Chi while looking at him with her pretty face. Her cheeks were puffed out, and she chewed the last of the sword blade while smiling broadly. She curved her scarlet, fine, and exquisite brows. "I'm already done eating the sword, so it would be futile for Master to catch me now." Heh. Gulp. Yun-Chi's throat at once made a sound of agitation. Gulp. Having swallowed the last of the blade, Hunger narrowed her eyes with an intoxicated look on her face. So good. It's so yummy, better than anything I've eaten until now. Master, you're so nice to actually find such a tasty thing for me to eat. Yun-Chi looked straight at her with his mouth opened wide, and it didn't close for a long while. That was none other than the Golden Crow sacred sword, the Golden Crow sacred sword. It was actually eaten by Hunger, as if it was just an ordinary sword. She had eaten the eternal night devil sword in the past. Although the sword had lost all of its energy, it was still an ancient devil sword, and thus it was quite scary to see how she had eaten it whole. But this time, she had even eaten something as great as the Golden Crow sacred sword. The Golden Crow sacred sword was absolutely different from the eternal night devil sword that didn't have any energy left. It was left behind by the Golden Crow, and the Phoenix divine spirit was guarding it. It was a divine sword that didn't acknowledge him even after all his efforts. Who would have thought that such a sword would be completely eaten by Hunger as if it was just another sword? Hunger has always been a befuddling little monster, but this. She was actually able to eat the Golden Crow sacred sword, The voice of the Phoenix divine spirit was trembling. There were no gods in this world now, so it was inconceivable for a true god-level being to shudder in fright. Who is she? What is she? Yun-Chi raised his head. He responded vaguely before managing to give a reply. She is the sword spirit of the sword in my possession. Normally, she eats swords for food. I also didn't know that could even eat the Golden Crow sacred sword. Yun-Chi's brain was a mess. OFCK, what should I do now? It was a divine item left behind by a true god, damn it. How did it end up being eaten by Hunger? This was no longer just an issue of wasting or profaning the sword. How am I going to compensate for it? Do I have to offer my head in compensation, huh? Sword spirit, there is such a sword spirit in this world. The soul voice of Phoenix said in doubt. The last of its soul power was locked onto Hunger. It could see the existence of Hunger, but unexpectedly its spirit sense was unable to perceive her existence. The main body of the Golden Crow sacred sword was forged from the scared bone of the Golden Crow sacred ancestor that was born from the primordial energy in the primal chaos after it met its death. It is almost impossible for even the power of a true god to break it. So how is this possible? Just how did she? Perhaps it's because... Yun-Chi wanted to make up a reason, but the sword was an existence of true god level. It was left behind by none other than the Golden Crow, and he was facing someone as great and knowledgeable as Phoenix divine spirit. No matter how much he racked his brains, it was impossible for him to come up with a passable explanation. It was at this time that Hunger suddenly let out a light cry of surprise. An unusual golden light flashed in her pupils, after which a layer of golden flame ignited on her as it spread throughout her body. Yun-Chi. Whoa, this fire feels the same as Master. It's so warm. Hunger spread open her arms as her shining eyes looked at the flame that had ignited on her body on its own. Very soon, she slowly narrowed her eyes again as her voice gradually became soft. I feel so tired all of a sudden. I really want to sleep. After stretching her waist as she yawned, Hunger said with sleepy eyes, Master, Hunger is so full, so I should go back to sleeping. Don't be noisy and wake me up. The moment she finished her words in a soft voice, her body transformed into a scarlet flittering light and returned to Yun Qi. Yun Qi was standing in a daze. He had absolutely not used the Golden Crow's record of the burning world just now, but the Golden Crow flame ignited on Honger's body its own. Could it be due to her eating the Golden Crow's sacred sword that some qualitative change happened in Honger? Thinking to this point, Yun Qi immediately summoned the Heaven-Smiting Sword. The huge sword appeared high up in the air. Yun Qi grabbed it in his hand in order to examine its aura, however. His arms suddenly felt very heavy, as if they were being suppressed by an immensely high mountain. Boom! The entire Heaven-Smiting Devil Slayer sword forced both his hands and arms downward as it firmly smashed onto the ground at his feet. An explosion sound resounded, as if a thunderbolt from the 9 heavens had burst apart, and the Inferno prison seethed crazily. The entire God-burying Inferno prison seemed to be trembling faintly. Yun Qi's body was bent down and his eyes were opened wide. He was desperately holding onto the hilt of the sword, causing blue veins to pop out on his arms, and his facial muscles became taut. But the Heaven-Smiting Sword didn't budge an inch. This is... Yun Qi suddenly gnashed his teeth as he released his profound energy. Following a loud and clear sound, the divine rock at his feet exploded a bit. However, the Heaven-Smiting Sword still didn't move in the slightest. It was as if it was firmly suppressed in place by heavenly power. Yun Qi lowered his brows and let out a light shout, as his profound strength dramatically increased due to him directly opening the rumbling heaven gate. After a muffled sound of rolling thunder, he finally managed to lift the Heaven-Smiting Sword up little by little. It was emitting such tyrannical and terrifying sword might that Yun Qi found it difficult to believe his senses. A few breaths later, Yun Qi finally succeeded in lifting the Heaven-Smiting Sword vertically. Then, he heavily swung the sword downward. Boom! A tremendous sound of explosion resounded, and it seemed as if the entire word was thoroughly shaken. The flames before Yun Qi's eyes were all torn open. Yun Qi let out a muffled sound as the Heaven-Smiting Devil-Slaying Sword slipped out of his hands in an instant and heavily smashed onto the ground. His arms were hanging down as they quivered intensely. This swing alone, just swinging the sword once, had actually used up all of Yun Qi's energy. He was breathing roughly like an ox as his whole body went limp. He almost could not feel the existence of his arms, but he didn't have the time to care about such things. His eyes were looking straight ahead at this moment. The Inferno prison was crazily seething, and there was a very long, scarlet sword mark carved on it. Despite the world-burning power of the flames here, the scarlet sword mark clearly existed in the midst of them, and didn't show any signs of disappearing even after a long time. This place was not part of an ordinary world, but the bottom of the God-burying Inferno prison. This is my power. Yun Qi lowered his head as he muttered to himself in disbelief while looking at his limp arms. The aura of the devil-slaying sword, the Phoenix Divine Spirit said. No, the aura of the Golden Crow sacred sword is mixed within it too. This sword actually merged the divine power of the Golden Crow sacred sword with itself. Just what exactly is it? Yun Qi didn't give a reply. He sat down cross-legged while panting and grabbed the hilt of the Heaven-Smiting Sword with his both hands. He no longer had the energy to lift it up again, but his eyes were shining with an unusual light of excitement. Yun Qi took out a time wheel pearl. Before he could employ his profound energy to activate it, the flames of the Inferno prison had already burned it open, and a time wheel barrier spread out around Yun Qi without making a sound. Eastern Divine Region, Moon God Realm. This place was a transcendent existence, given its status as one of the 4 king realms of the Eastern Divine Region. Numerous people had prostrated themselves before it as well as looked up to it for countless years. It was a far more scared existence than the Lunar Palace from the myths and legends of the secular world. Divine Empress Hall was located in the Moon God Palace, which was the core area of the Moon God Realm. It was a sacred place among sacred places. Even someone as distinguished as the Moon Gods, who looked disdainfully at all the living beings of the world, would absolutely not dare to easily set foot in this place. Those living in such a high-level existence as the Moon God Realm basically disdained the pursuit of extravagant things. But every inch and corner of the Divine Empress Hall could only be described with the 2 words, extremely extravagant. Lunar glazed glass had been used as the tiles and bricks of this place. The tables and chairs were all made from the wood of the hidden moon tree, and the bed, curtains, and every bit of the things in this place were all so majestic that an ordinary person couldn't even imagine it. It was because this place was the residence of the most majestic woman in the moon god realm. There was a tall and wide crystal mirror at the center of the main hall that displayed the reflection of a beautiful, dreamlike woman sitting. She wore no makeup, but it didn't matter, for the heaven itself seemed to have done everything in its power to sculpt her countenance to perfection. Her skin was a perfect match for the expression bone of jade, flesh of ice, and not one part of her facial features, her snow-white skin or her vermilion lips, were imperfect, inelegant, or crude. However, her perfect countenance also exuded a coolness and holiness that averted all eyes. She gave off the impression of a pure, untainted fairy who resided in a world higher than the 9 heavens. A young girl dressed in a moon-white long dress was grooming the woman. The more the young stared at the impossibly beautiful countenance in the mirror, the more absent-minded she grew. She muttered in her daze, "God Empress, you're so beautiful. It's almost like you're a fairy from heaven. The legendary goddess and dragon queen cannot possibly surpass this. Can they? No wonder the god emperor is so infatuated with you, Empress. Only a fairy like you is worthy of his love." The woman said nothing. Her eyes looked as clear as water. The young girl adorned the Empress' hair with a simple flowing cloud hairpin. Then she carefully spread the Empress' hair across her shoulders. "God Empress," the young girl couldn't stop herself from asking as she groomed the woman's hair, "why won't you let your hair to grow longer? Considering your godlike beauty, surely you'll look even better if you were to grow your hair." The god Empress looked down slightly and whispered, "The hair was cut for love, but the man is dead. The love is gone, so why is there need for hair to grow?" "Ah!" The young girl blinked her eyes stupidly. When the grooming was done, the young girl stared at the god Empress in the mirror just like she always did. Her eyes were bright, half stunned and half dazed. "God Empress, Jin Yue heard that the final 4 god children of the conferred god battle has been decided." The young girl told the woman about the latest news in the eastern divine region, knowing that the god Empress was unconcerned for anyone or anything inside or outside moon god realm. "I guess the profound god convention will end pretty soon," the god Empress said quietly. Her tone was as gentle and plain as still water. "Amen. The god emperor must be wanting the profound god convention to end as soon as possible, so he may complete his wedding with you." The young girl pursed her lips into a small smile when she said this. "Considering how much the god emperor dotes on you, he must be missing you day and night after several months of being apart, he. God Empress. Oh, right. The 4 conferred god children this time are unlike all previous times. One of them actually hails from a middle star realm. He has defeated many proud children of the upper star realms on the conferred god battle, and he even managed to beat Lu Lengchuan and replace him as a new god child. Everyone is talking about him since it's such incredible news." The god Empress spoke. "This may be the first time in the history of Eastern Divine Region where a middle star realm cultivator joins the ranks of the 4 conferred children. It's only natural for a commotion to occur." The young girl nodded. "As it turns out, he actually hails from the middle star realm you often spoke of, the Snow Song realm." Snow Song realm. Finally, a small ripple of emotion appeared in her eyes. "I owe Snow Song realm a great favor, but unfortunately I wasn't given permission to set foot in that place and repay the favor." "What is his name, Jin Yue? If he's a conferred god child, he will surely be invited to the wedding a month from now. We should gift him something useful when the day arrives. It will scarcely make up for what I owe the Snow Song realm, but it is still better than nothing." "Yes, Jin Yue will not forget your instructions, God Empress." The young girl bowed before continuing. "That Snow Song realm disciple is called Yun Qi. Apparently he actually hails from the lower Ah." She could feel the god Empress shuddering all of a sudden. In the young girl's eyes, the god Empress was as quiet and elegant as the moon in the sky. That was why her unusual, intense reaction had given her a near fright. She hastily asked, "What's wrong, Empress? What's wrong?" The god Empress' breathing was a little rapid, but she quickly regained her cool in the next instant. She shook her head slightly before answering, "It's nothing. I just recalled someone who passed away many years ago." "Passed away?" The young girl was slightly surprised. "Did you happen to know a Yun Qi in the past, Empress? He must be a blessed person to be remembered by you despite his passing." The god Empress slowly rose to her feet and stared to the distance. "He's my late husband. He has been dead for 8 years already." "It has been 8 years. Ah," the young girl was stunned for a second. Then her face quickly drained of all color as she collapsed on her knees and trembled all over. Empress Jinyue heard absolutely nothing. Nothing, please spare me, Empress. There's no need to be afraid. The God Empress sighed quietly. The God Emperor is aware that I have a late husband. Even she herself couldn't understand why she was able to speak of the taboo so easily. Her voice went farther and farther away, and the young girl looked up to find the God Empress figure outside the main hall already. She asked frightfully, "Where are you going, Empress? Are you going to see the lady? You don't need to follow me." By the time the voice reached her, the God Empress figure had vanished from her sight. The young girl blankly knelt on the floor for a very, very long time. She had accompanied the God Empress for many years, but in that one moment she had become completely different from the God Empress she had known. That moment, after she said the name, Yun-Chi. Eternal Heaven God Realm. The conferred God battle continued along its course. After the latest conferred God children had been chosen, the conferred God battle officially reached the end stage. The battle of the God children would be ensuing soon, and no one had any doubt that the matches would be fiercer than ever. Today's battle was the final match within the conferred gods group. Luo Changsheng would be fighting Shui Yangyu. They were the only two combatants who had not suffered a defeat since the conferred god battle began. Just like everyone had expected earlier, Luo Changsheng defeated Shui Yingyu and became the champion of the conferred gods group. Shui Yingyu fell to the losers group and would be fighting the winner of Jun Zile and Yun Chi's battle. Her battle would also be the final battle of the losers group. Everyone predicted Jun Zile to be Shui Yingyu's next opponent. It was the only logical choice. High up in the air beyond the conferred god stage, Qianai Yinger withdrew her gaze after the battle had ended. Considering that Yun Chi hasn't shown up today, I guess he isn't ready to surrender the battle against Jun Zile just yet. "Do you think he can defeat Jun Zile, miss?" the withered old man asked. He knew very well that Yun Chi was the reason Qianai Yinger had hung around in Eternal Heaven Realm all this time. It was also why she was completely disinterested in today's battle, even though it was a fight between two god children. "What do you think, Uncle Gu?" The goddess shot a question right back at him. "Absolutely impossible," Uncle Gu said calmly. "It's absolutely impossible for him to beat Jun Zile unless he can climb up to a whole new level in just 3 days." "We will see," Qianai Yinger whispered to herself. Her golden hair danced in the wind, and the world around her dimmed in shame even though her face was still covered. "Miss," the old man asked, "what in the world is different about Yun Chi?" The corners of her naturally red lips curled slightly in response. "You've led a long life, Uncle Gu, but this has to be the first time you cannot control yourself from asking a question, am I right?" "Hey," the old man let out a rasping laugh. "He is someone at the Divine Tribulation Realm who took down an opponent at the late-stage Divine Spirit Realm, and has also unleashed 2 manifest gods. I have lived for 120,000 years in vain, as this is inexplicable even to me. It absolutely isn't something that can be explained by the word talent alone. To think that even someone of your experience and knowledge would use the word inexplicable." Qianai Yinger smiled. "However, your sense of shame is unfounded, Uncle Gu. There are only a few people in the entire God realm whose experience and knowledge are equal to yours. When it comes to Yun Chi, though, I must admit that his secret exceeds even the recognition of the God realm." And of course it was, because his secret was something the God realm had never witnessed until now. An inheritance on the level of the creation gods. Uncle Gu looked up. "Still, it is such an important secret that the fewer people who know about this, the better. This is something you taught me yourself, Uncle Gu." Her tone was flat, but somehow it was still the most melodious and intoxicating sound in the entire world. It was almost as if her voice was tinged with magic. "He," Uncle Gu nodded smilingly. "It seems you already have a plan, miss." "I do not." Qianai Yinger shook her head in denial. Behind the mask, no one could see what sort of light was sparkling in those eyes that could fell the hearts of every man or woman of the Eastern divine region. "I simply wish to see the extent of his abilities and the heights he can attain. Once I've ascertained that, then I'll decide if he's worth all that effort I spent." The days passed by slowly. Although everyone was looking forward to last few conferred god battles, their tension was actually a lot lessened. No one was doubting the quality of the remaining few matches, but the winners and the losers already felt clear to the onlookers. There was no question that the first place of the conferred god battle would belong to Luo Changsheng. The second place would be decided among Jun Zile and Shui Yingyu, and no one was surprised if either combatant turned out to be the better of the other. Yun Chi was destined to lose to Jun Zile, but that didn't mean he wasn't the biggest real winner of this profound god convention. The praises he won, the eyes he attracted, and the commotions he triggered were far bigger than even the other three god children put together. He was already titled the pride of all Middle Star realms by countless profound practitioners in countless Middle Star realms. 3 days later, Junzile and Yunqi's battle finally arrived. However, Yunqi hadn't been seen or heard at all for the last 3 days. No one had seen him in the Eternal Heaven realm either. God-burying Inferno prison, Flame God realm. For the last 3 days, Hugh had been standing at the edge of the Inferno prison. He hadn't taken a single step away throughout this time. He was calm and unperturbed at the beginning, but as time passed his worry grew bigger and bigger. It was because Yunqi hadn't come out of the Inferno prison even once. The young man had sunk into the Inferno prison and gone down to a depth where even his consciousness couldn't reach, and stayed there for 3 whole days. Words couldn't describe how incredible this feat was. It wasn't something the strongest expert of the Flame God realm, Yan Wangkang, or he himself could do. Anyone else in his position would have thought that Yunqi had perished inside the Inferno prison. There was just no way it could have ended any other way. But Hugh never left this place. He believed Yunqi's words, and he was waiting very, very nervously for a miracle to come true. Today was the day of Yunqi and Junzile's battle. There were less than 6 hours left before the battle officially began, so his emotions were understandably strung taut. His hands were tightly clenched, and his breathing had grown heavy for some time. That boy can't have. Just as he was starting to mutter to himself worriedly, an explosion suddenly occurred from the flames before him. Then a figure flew out and landed lightly in front of Hugh. Hugh's mouth was agape for a long while. Finally, he let out a loud laugh before shouting, "You finally came out, young boy. I guess I haven't spent the last 3 days in vain after all." He might be laughing on the surface, and there was undeniably relief in his heart, but that emotion was quickly being overrun by a tidal wave of absolute shock. 3 days, he had stayed within the God-burying Inferno prison for a whole 3 days. Yunqi was smiling calmly, unlike the Golden Crow sect master. "Sorry to keep you waiting, sect master Hugh. Ha, the important thing is that you're safe. You never make a promise you're not sure you can keep, so I should have known that you'd be fine." "Oh," Hugh's eyes suddenly changed. "9th level of the Divine Tribulation realm, have you achieved a breakthrough?" Yunqi's profound strength was at the 8th level of the Divine Tribulation realm before he entered the Inferno prison. However, that was obviously not the case right now. Still, he didn't think that a small breakthrough like this meant that Yunqi had any chance against Junzile. Anyone else would be thinking the same too. However, as Hugh stared at Yunqi, he suddenly became wrapped in an inexplicable feeling. It should have just been a small breakthrough, but somehow Yunqi's aura felt completely different from before. Yet he couldn't tell exactly what was different. "Amen." Yunqi nodded. "The time Wheel Pearl allowed me to cultivate for 7 months straight inside the Inferno prison, so I'm glad something came of it. I have no regrets left even if I lose to Junzile today." 7 months? Hugh trembled all over, and he stared wide-eyed at Yunqi. He nearly bit his own tongue in the process. 3 days in the Inferno prison was a feat to cause tidal waves in his heart already. 7 months. "Let's return to the Eternal Heaven realm now. I'll be relying on you, Sect Master Hugh." Yunqi's eyes were clear, and a fire seemed to be burning deep inside them. He had tuned his condition to the optimal state prior to leaving the Inferno prison, and unlike a few days ago, he was absolutely itching to fight Junzile now. "All right." Hugh's eyes wavered, his lips trembling for a very long time. Finally, he barely steadied himself, slowly nodded, and grabbed Yunqi's hand, both then vanishing from the edge of the Inferno prison. Realm, there was only one match today, and it was the 7th match of the losers group. Yunqi versus Junzile. This match was about as predetermined as the previous match between Luo Changsheng and Shui Yingyu, but not only did it not fall off in terms of interest at all, it attracted more gazes even when compared to the final match of the conferred God group. It was because this would be Yunqi's final match. As the most eye-catching dark horse of this year's conferred God battle and the man who utterly shook the entire Eastern Divine region, it was only natural that everyone wanted to witness his final performance. This was especially true for the profound practitioners of Middle and Lower Star realms. They all thought of Yunqi as their pride and glory, so there was no way they were going to miss his final battle. There were almost no empty marked seats in the spectator stands of the conferred God stage. It was obvious that the youngsters weren't the only ones who wanted to see Yun-Chi. Those peak experts that stood at the top of the Eastern Divine region would never admit it in the open, but in their subconscious. They all thought that Yun-Chi was someone they must pay attention to. The Sword Sovereign and Junzile had arrived a long time ago, but not Yun-Chi. It wasn't until the last minute that a heat wave approached from afar, Hugh Ruli flying through the air with great speed while holding Yun-Chi. They both landed in the middle of the spectator stands, the trail of fire Hugh Ruli left behind not dissipating for a very long time. Wah! A crisp, joyful, and absolutely melodious cry reached nearly everyone's ears as Shui Meiyin jumped into the air. It's Big Brother Yun-Chi, Big Brother Yun-Chi is here. Countless profound cultivators twirled their eyes and shot Shui Meiyin an odd look at the same time. Sweat poured down Shui Qianheng's head as he scolded her in a small voice. Don't shout, that's very impolite. Yun-Chi's profound strength is at the 9th stage of the divine tribulation realm. Shui Yingyu frowned slightly. HMPH? The boy didn't show up for your fight against Luo Changsheng, and he wasn't heard from at all for the past few days. That means he had to be cultivating in secret for today's battle. I didn't think he would actually make a breakthrough, though. Shui Qianheng continued in a disapproving tone. It's only been a few days, so he must have used the time wheel pearl. Still, if he thinks he's a match for Junzile just because his realm went up a small stage, then I must say that he's too naive. HMPH. Daddy, you're totally wrong. Shui Meiyin pressed her lips together in dissatisfaction, but her eyes quickly turned sparkly a second later. I have a feeling that my big brother Yun-Chi has become a lot stronger, as expected of my big brother Yun-Chi. Why you? Shui Qianheng's face distorted when he saw his precious daughter staring at Yun-Chi like a love-struck fool, but what could he do? Scold her, beat her. In the end, he had no choice but to glare piercingly at Yun-Chi. That brat, if we weren't entering the eternal heaven-divine realm soon, I'd HMPH. Daddy, what did you mutter just now? Shui Meiyin looked sideways and asked. I didn't say anything. Your ears must be fooling you. Shui Qianheng turned his head away and answered innocently. Yun-Chi's arrival had attracted everyone's attention, so of course they noticed his improvement as well. However, it was just a minor surprise. If Yun-Chi and Junzile's overall strength were close, a small increase in level could definitely tip the balance in his favor. However, the gap between Yun-Chi and Junzile couldn't be bridged by something that minor. Congratulations for your breakthrough, Brother Yun, Huo Poyun said cheerfully. It's all thanks to Sect Master Huo's aid and the time wheel pearls you gave me, Yun-Chi replied with a smile. He then looked around the conferred god stage and allowed his gaze to sweep past Junzile's figure. Yan Juhai and Mu Bingyun both stared at Yun-Chi with odd looks on their faces. They were the ones standing closest to Yun-Chi, so they could sense that an increase in profound strength was not the only thing that had changed about Yun-Chi. A sense of heaviness was radiating from Yun-Chi's body, something they had never felt before. The 7th match of the conferred god battle losers group will be Yun-Chi from the Snow Song Realm versus Junzile, the Sword Sovereign's successor. Both participants, please enter the conferred god stage now. Yun-Chi immediately got up and grew focused. But just as he was about to leap into the stage, Mu Bingyun suddenly caught his arm and said, Yun-Chi, Junzile holds a serious grudge against you, so it's very likely that she'll try to wound you severely on purpose. Be very, very careful. Yun-Chi turned around and shot her a don't worry look. He even gripped the back of her hand slightly in reassurance. Before Mu Bingyun could recover from her surprise, Yun-Chi had already jumped into the air and landed on the conferred god stage. Mu Bingyun, Jun Wuming stared at Yun-Chi for a long time before his pale white eyebrows furrowed slightly. Layer, please promise me 2 things before you fight Yun-Chi. Please instruct me, Master. Junzile bowed her head respectfully. First, you must not underestimate your enemy, Jun Wuming said seriously. It has only been a few days, but this boy feels a lot different than he did before. You must be careful. Yes, Junzile promised. Second, Jun Wuming paused for a moment before continuing. You may beat him, but you mustn't wound him severely on purpose. His words held far more weight this time. There was a reason behind this. His recent trip to the Snow Song Realm had made him invariably wary of Mu Xunian. He himself was about to run out of lifespan, so he didn't care if Mu Xunian might threaten his life. However, he was afraid that Junzile might perish at Mu Xunian's hands. It wasn't her unnaturally powerful, profound strength that he was afraid of, but her temper. Back in the Snow Song realm, Xianxia had bowed and acted differentially to him in the way a junior would to a senior. But after Jun Zile had offended Yun-Chi, Xianxia had immediately turned hostile, gave him a harsh scolding, and slapped Jun Zile in the face. She even kicked them out of the Snow Song realm at the very end, as if the title, Sword Sovereign, a title that awed and bowed the heads of upper star realms, meant less than a speck of dust to her. It was probably impossible to find another person like her in the entire God realm. If Jun Zile did deal Yun-Chi a severe blow, Xianxia would never let her go, even if she had to break all of the conferred God stage's rules. That was how protective she was over Yun-Chi. The consequences were unimaginable if that really were to happen. There was no doubting Xianxia's evil temper. It was absolutely something she would do. Jun Zile fell silent for a while before she finally answered in an indifferent tone. Yes. Jun Wuming wanted to say something, but his lips refused to move when he noticed that Jun Zile's eyes had become much colder than usual. In the end, he waved her away while saying, "Go." There was a white flash and a breeze of sword energy, and Jun Zile appeared on the conferred God stage. Her gaze was calm and chilly, and an invisible sword was raging across the stage even before she used her profound energy. In an instant, it was as if 10,000 invisible swords were pointing towards Yun-Chi at once. The Sword Sovereign's successor's sword intent was nothing to scoff at. At first, Yun-Chi looked completely calm as he stubbornly matched gazes with Jun Zile. However, his eyes began to roam, and his complexion gradually turned pale just a few breaths later. In the end, his breathing had become completely erratic, and his body wobbled non-stop as if he was about to fall over. Neither combatant had summoned their profound energy or engaged each other in combat yet. It was just a clash of auras and nothing more. But Yun-Chi was still the clear loser of this clash, and many were shaking their heads, sighing from the spectator stands. Yet no one was surprised by this result. She truly is the Sword Sovereign's successor. To think that her sword intent would be this powerful despite her young age, Xianxia sighed. It will be very difficult for Yun-Chi to do anything against her. She's oppressing brother Yun with her sword intent before the match has even started. She's clearly trying to embarrass brother Yun, Huo Poyun said angrily. A quiet sigh escaped Mu Bingyun's lips. She was aware of the grudge between Yun-Chi and Jun Zile, and she knew that she should be impressed that Yun-Chi had managed to hold out this far. If the one on the stage was someone else, they might have surrendered in fear before the match even began. Honorable Chi Hui frowned slightly. He had plenty of life experience, and he could clearly see the hate Jun Zile harbored against Yun-Chi. It was no small hatred either. It looks like this fight will end pretty soon, Honorable Hui thought to himself before shooting Yun-Chi a glance. Finally, he waved a hand and declared, "Begin." The second Honorable Hui shouted. A bright ray of light flashed across everyone's eyes. Misty light exited its sheath, and a pale white beam instantly appeared between Yun-Chi and Jun Zile. It was as if a white crack had suddenly burst open in the middle of the conferred God stage. "Watch out, Yun-Chi!" "Allah!" Countless exclamations instantly filled the spectator stands. However, these cries vanished just as quickly as if the sounds were devoured by a black hole. A vermilion sword arc had burst into existence at the same time as the pale white sword beam. Although the horizontal flash was half an instant slower than the sword beam, the burst of divine might had suddenly clenched around everyone's heart like an invisible hand. Boom! There was a loud explosion, and one of the combatants was blown backwards like a rag doll. They vomited blood in midair again and again before they finally crashed against the ground several hundred meters away. The terrible sword might that had caused this continued to envelop more than half of the conferred God stage like an undying fog. It was as if the entire place had suddenly been stuffed into a vacuum. Silence sat heavily across the entire God-conferred stage, and the spectators' eyes were so wide it was as if they would tear themselves apart. Honorable Hui had just declared the beginning of the battle, and one of the combatants had already been severely wounded during the first exchange. Moreover, the person who was sent flying several hundred meters away while spitting blood was none other than Jun Zile. The girl was currently lying limply on the ground with blood drenching more than half of her white clothes. Even now, blood was pouring out of her pale white lips like a water tap. It was clear to everyone that she had suffered extremely serious internal injuries, and her eyes had completely lost their previous sharpness and chill. There was only murky emptiness in her eyes, a kind of look one might have if they had suddenly fallen into the abyss. Yun Qi was leaning backwards with a bloody hole in his chest area. However, his chest wasn't completely pierced through. He slowly bent forward and stood straight once more. He didn't take a step backwards despite the piercing blow, almost as if someone had nailed his feet to the ground with a pair of actual nails. His chest had also stopped bleeding on its own. The pretense that he was suppressed by Jun Zilei's invisible sword intent was completely gone. Right now, Yun Qi was staring down on the heavily wounded Jun Zilei, coldly and loftily, like a 10,000-year-old pine tree. The huge vermilion sword he was holding didn't burn brightly with power, but it felt like a giant abyss creature that had completely awakened from its deep slumber all the same. It was as if the entire conferred god stage was trapped inside its terrible maw right now. What is going on? Huo Poyun stuttered as he stared wide-eyed at the stage. Jun Zilei is... I'm not dreaming, am I? Noise erupted from the spectator stands and pierced through the blanket of deathly silence. More than half of the crowd had gotten on their feet, questioning the reality presented before them. Yun Qi had created too many astounding miracles on the god-conferred stage that didn't just defy, but break an entire world's common sense into pieces. It was why Yun Qi's matches had garnered so much attention. Just when everyone thought that they had seen Yun Qi's limit, he had colored their faces with shock yet again right at the start of the battle. He had severely wounded Jun Zilei in one hit. Cries from every direction filled his ears. The entire eastern divine region might be rioting due to that instantaneous exchange, however. Yun Qi wore a calm look on his face. Not only did he not try to press home the attack, he was holding the heaven-smiting sword and staring at the absent-minded Jun Zilei's figure coolly. The corners of his lips turned up indiscernibly. Yun Qi knew very well that Jun Zilei hated him to the bone. He knew that his rise to fame had only served to deepen her hatred. Jun Zilei defeating Huo Poyun in an instant was in order to vent her anger. It didn't take a genius to figure out that she would only act worse when her opponent was him. The best way Jun Zilei could devastate him was to defeat him as quickly and as horribly as possible. If she could beat him just like the day she took down Huo Poyun with one strike, she could instantly turn him into the laughingstock who was taken down instantly by the sword sovereign's disciple, no matter how famous he had gotten earlier. That was why he had assumed that Jun Zilei would attack him with everything she had the moment the battle began. He also assumed that she would use a technique that was far crueler and more merciless than the one she used against Huo Poyun. But Yun Qi wasn't Huo Poyun. Even if Jun Zilei did catch him off guard, there was no guarantee that she could take him down in a single strike. That was why she had unleashed her sword intent and tried to terrify him even before the fight began. Sword intent was a force field that appeared naturally to someone who practiced the way of the sword. Since it was not connected to profound energy, it didn't count as a breach of the rules. Yun Qi pretended to be afraid and distracted when Jun Zilei had oppressed him with her sword intent. The moment Honorable Kui declared the start of the match, Jun Zilei had immediately injected the highest amount of profound energy and sword intent she could muster into her misty light sword, and fired a sword beam at Yun Qi. It all turned out as Yun Qi had expected. He didn't make any attempt to dodge or defend, but made use of that exact same moment to unleash rumbling heaven. Although his sword-wielding speed was slower than Jun Zilei's, he had the Buddha heart divine veins that Mu Xunian had personally given him. Along with his gathered profound energy, the explosive speed far exceeded that of Jun Zilei. That vermilion blade of light was far less eye-catching than Jun Zilei's brilliant white sword beam, but its power was vastly stronger. When Jun Zilei's sword beam pierced through the vermilion sword light, its strength was reduced by at least 70%. Jun Zilei would never have expected Yun Qi to make an explosive move at the same moment as her, and a move that was far stronger and more intense than hers. That very moment she made her move was also her moment of vulnerability. She was thoroughly caught defenseless and thus suffered heavy injuries, and all Yun Qi suffered was just a bloody hole in his body, not even his bones were pierced. Ah! Jun Wuming was shocked for a moment before sighing. It was obvious that Jun Zilei hadn't listened to him one bit. She was unable to control the amount of hatred she felt for Yun Qi, and Yun Qi had made use of that hatred against her, heavily wounding her. This kid is forever giving us pleasant surprises. Heh, Kang Shishin chuckled. Merely raising one small level at the divine tribulation realm and his profound strength has gone up by leaps and bounds. He's completely different from before, the star god emperor spoke in surprise. Even his sword is very different from before. Not just very different from before, it is clearly heavens apart. The Brahma heaven god emperor squinted. It is quite obviously the same sword, but its power has risen by more than 10 times. Frankly speaking, it has already far surpassed Junzile's misty light. Within just a few days, his very person, even his sword, they all seem to have undergone a complete metamorphosis. How in the world did he do it? Every god emperor's gaze was locked onto Yuan-Chi. They were speechless for quite a while. Once again, these existences that stood at the very peak of the god realm were rendered speechless by a junior who wasn't even 30 years old. Brother Yun, his level of profound strength, has it really only risen by one small level? Huo Poyun murmured in disbelief. Poyun, Huo Ruli let out a deep breath. What little Yun has done is to help vent on your behalf. I know. Huo Poyun gently nodded. Sect Master Huo, where did Yuan-Chi go to these few days and what did he do? Mu Bingyun asked, her usually frosty demeanor giving way to one of shock and surprise. Huo Ruli slowly shook his head. I never would have thought that he would actually make it this far. This kid, he's definitely the biggest little monster the entire Eastern Divine Realm has ever seen. This entire battle, perhaps, he might even possibly win this battle. No, it's not a matter of being possible, it's a matter of most likely. Yan Juhai shouted, all worked up. That sword of Yuan-Chi's just now has already far exceeded what it has done before. The injuries Jun Zile has suffered aren't light. Even if she gathers all her remaining strength to battle Yuan-Chi, she's already at a grave disadvantage. He must not be careless, Mu Bingyun said. Although she suffered a huge injury, she's still the successor of the Sword Sovereign. Jun Zile started to slowly stand up on the conferred god stage. Her face was an unnatural shade of white. The blood at the side of her lips and across her white dress were a shocking sight. As she gathered more sword light around her, a frightening and smothering sword pressure that started to suffocate several spectators gathered around her. The entire spectator stands grew silent. All the profound practitioners of the Eastern Divine Region held their breaths as their hearts pounded madly. Could Yuan-Chi win? 10 breaths ago, such a notion was simply absurd. At this moment, however, it now surged within the hearts of everyone present. Being the Sword Sovereign's successor, Jun Zile wasn't a fool. The moment she stood up, she realized that Yuan-Chi had used that moment of her mental state to deal a counter blow. From the very beginning, feigning weakness in front of her sword intent was clearly a trick of his, giving her the confidence she needed to make her move. Yuan-Chi's bearing had also undergone a heaven-surmounting change. The strength of his sword made her feel massively suppressed. She understood more than anyone else that, although she was caught unawares, leaving an opening in her defenses, she probably wouldn't be any better off since he was able to make her to suffer injuries to such a degree in a single strike, even if she wasn't caught off guard and could muster her all to defend. And that strike had dealt such damage even after passing through and weakening most of her sword beam. Furthermore, Yuan-Chi didn't take advantage of the situation to deliver a follow-up blow, but instead stood his ground, not moving an inch. It was as clear as day to her. This was without a doubt a form of ridicule and contempt. She thought of the warning that Jun Wuming had given her. The current Yuan-Chi was completely different from the Yuan-Chi from 3 days ago. Jun Zile's breathing started to get flustered. The misty light sword shook, but as time passed the blade stopped trembling and her breathing began to calm down. Even the hatred within her eyes had disappeared, and in its place was a sea of calm. At the very end, Jun Zile's pupils completely vanished. At the same time, all signs of light instantly dimmed, covering the entire conferred god stage in darkness. A vast starry sky then suddenly appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The starry sky seemed to encompass and swallow everything, leaving Jun Zile in all her glowing splendor. It seemed like all the stars were floating and revolving around her, making her look as if she was a moon goddess. Floating in midair, her blood-stained dress only served to add to the image of sacredness she was currently showing. Undistracted sword domain, Yuan-Chi, watch out, Mu Bingyun called out. A chilling wave of suppression swept all around. Even outside of the sword domain, the eyes of countless young profound practitioners were all wide and shaking. That surprising sword slash Yuan-Chi released just now did not only heavily injure Jun Zile physically, it had also pierced her dignity. However, the undistracted sword domain required a state where the heart and sword were one. One had to first enter into a state of utter calm. She had suffered blows on both fronts, but was able to recover and execute the undistracted sword domain within a few breaths. This is extremely impressive. an elder of the glazed light realm sighed. If she couldn't do this at the least, how else could she be chosen by Jun Wuming as his successor? Shui Qianheng continued. But executing the undistracted sword domain after barely getting up means that she knows she has not much time left to battle as her injuries aren't light. Jun Zile has already been injured. Her breathing is very obviously growing weaker. But even Luo Changsheng couldn't deal with her undistracted sword domain easily. Furthermore, Luo Changsheng's teacher is Fairy Guxi, so he already knows how to deal with the undistracted sword domain. As for Yun Qi, can he really? He definitely can, Shui Meiyan shouted with all her might. HMPH, Jun Zile was able to leave 2 deep cavities in Luo Changsheng's body even in her heavily injured state. Just based on that, I wouldn't be surprised if she manages to easily turn Yun Qi's body into a beehive, HMPH. Shui Qianheng retorted ungraciously. Within the sword domain, Yun Qi seemed like an insignificant existence in front of those myriad stars. Like a grain of sand that could be easily swept away, as if he were but a mere speck of dust. His gaze tightened and turned serious. He gripped the heaven-smiting sword and steadily moved forward. Jun Zile's movements began to exhibit a change. Almost immediately, a blinding explosion occurred. Countless stars turned into sword beams, shooting toward Yun Qi. Within the undistracted sword domain, every object could become a sword, and every sword had a soul that would arrive at their mark. They could only be blocked and not dodged. Golden flames started to burn around Yun Qi, and the entire heaven-smiting sword was then also covered in the flames. The surrounding sword beams and sword energy around him was immense as they rained down upon him, but he ignored everything and slashed out with all his might. A loud boom sounded. Within a 30-meter radius of Yun Qi were bright golden flames that exploded outwards, interrupting the sword auras. Any sword beams that came into contact of that distance were immediately destroyed and turned into specks of fleeting light. However, these specks of light formed into more sword beams and continued their bombardment, aiming to pierce Yun Qi. These innumerable sword beams were sufficient to turn Yun Qi into a pile of fine dust. Boom! Yun Qi struck out a second time. A renewed sword beam drew near and was once again destroyed. And this time, its destruction was more absolute. After Honger had forcefully eaten the Golden Crow sacred sword, both the heaven-smiting sword's weight and power underwent an overwhelming upgrade. The 7 months Yun Qi spent in the God-burying Inferno prison, aside from assimilating the Phoenix God's blood and training in its profound arts, a larger portion of his time was spent learning how to control and wield the new and improved heaven-smiting sword. After a full 6 months, he had finally barely managed to accomplish this, and only did so when he pushed his rumbling heaven state to its limits. Otherwise, he was completely unable to wield the sword in his purgatory state, let alone his normal state. It was also during this process that Yun Qi's profound strength had been tempered to become incomparably solid. With the reborn heaven-smiting sword, Yun Qi being able to use it also meant him being reborn as well. Boom, 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 boom. Within the undistracted sword domain, every speck of dust, every pocket of air could be turned into a sharp sword. Once one was caught within the domain, that meant suffering a hell of 10,000 swords. At this moment, however, a bright fire was burning at the center of the sword domain. Regardless of how bright or mighty these blades of sword light were, they still crumbled before Yun Qi's might. The spectator stands were rendered speechless. The mighty sounds of sword beams piercing through the air and exploding drowned out everything. Before the gazes of everyone present, an uncountable number of sword beams had rained down. Just anyone among them had a terrifying aura that could suffocate any of the young practitioners there. But even so, none of them could hurt Yun Qi in the slightest. They couldn't even get near him. Yun Qi is actually able to block them. Not only that, it seems that not even a hair of his has been harmed thus far. If it were me, I'd have died 10,000 times over, HSSSS, said a young, profound practitioner as he sucked in a breath of cold air. That's the undistracted sword domain. Even Luo Changsheng was injured by it. Does this mean that Yun Qi actually has a chance of defeating Jun Zile? Boom, boom, boom. Every time Yun Qi swung his sword, an intense and eye-catching blazing light would fire up all around him on the conferred God stage. The audience looked on in shock as the shockwaves thundered out. Both Jun Zile and Yun Qi were using swords. Jun Zile's mastery was at the limits of absolute sharpness, being able to pierce through everything, while Yun Qi's sword was one of absolute domination. Both techniques were sword-based, but were two very different domains. In the seats of the shrouding sky realm, Lu Lengchuan, who had purposely came to watch the battle, was standing up. Although usually steady and calm, he currently had a crazed look in his eyes and his breathing was flustered. When he had battled Yun Qi, he was dripping with happiness and excitement. When he had admitted defeat, he had done it of his own accord, and he had absolutely no regrets. But just when he thought he had seen the limits of Yun Qi's ability, just by improving by one small realm, Yun Qi had turned into a completely different person. He was definitely not the same Yun Qi he had battled previously. Furthermore, every sword move he executed contained a sword strength that made it hard for him to breathe. He could clearly feel that any one of Yun Qi's sword strikes was something that he would not be able to defend against. It was just 3 short days. Even if he had the time wheel pearl and the addition of the pearls he had given Yun Qi, he would have at most had just a few months to prepare. Looks like that match was destined to be the only time when I was ever fit to be his opponent, Lu Lengchuan muttered to himself. He was the son of the Shrouding Sky Realm King. His identity was lofty and glorious. Yun Qi, however, was born from the lower realms. His master was only someone from a middle realm, and yet right now in Lu Lengchuan's eyes, Yun Qi was standing in a position which he could only look up to. In fact, the distance between them would only grow further and further. I'm afraid that none of the god emperors will be able to predict what the future holds for this child. Shrouding Sky Realm King Lu Zhou sighed. If he manages to defeat Jun Zile in this battle, I'm afraid all 4 king realms will fight over the chance to recruit him. Royal Father, will Brother Yun, will he really win? Lu Lengchuan whispered. Though he is able to block all of the attacks from the undistracted sword domain, he is still sealed in a deadlock and unable to leave. The moment he leaves an opening, he will. No, Lu Wei shook his head. Did you forget? Yun Qi still has his manifest gods. Boom. Just as Lu Zhou's words landed, the brilliant flames on the conferred god stage exploded. Scattered flames and broken sword beams shot in all 4 directions. At the same time, a phoenix cry sounded in the air. A golden image flew through the air, then flew through the countless layers of sword beams, heavily smashing into the body of Jun Zile, who was standing in the center of her sword domain. A golden inferno enveloped her entire body. Jun Zile's entire body shook. Her undistracted sword domain trembled violently. All the sword beams had disappeared, leaving only Yun Qi standing in the middle of flames that reached over 300 meters. Yellow Spring's ashes. Boom. Like the core of a sun exploding outwards, cracks started to fissure all around the entire undistracted sword domain. The Golden Crow Manifest God's attack exploded at the same time. Yellow Spring's ashes mercilessly blasted away Jun Zile, who was at the core of the domain. Boom, Jun Zile's eyes returned to normal. Her entire body was set alight as she was sent flying like a leaf in a hurricane. The undistracted sword domain had collapsed entirely, and all the stars within it had extinguished at the same time. Amidst the destructive sight, Yun Qi's figure could be seen holding a glowing vermilion sword as he flew straight down like a falling star, heading straight for Jun Zile.